Recently, Starfield has made a few announcements about its future, such as some DLCs like Terran Armada and the Free Lanes expansions, along with a PS5 port that I'm sure all the remaining 10 Sony exclusive Bethesda fans that are still left alive on Earth were absolutely clamoring for. And I was kind of surprised to see this, as I just kind of assumed that Bethesda would just more or less abandon Starfield after the wet fart that was the Shattered Spaces DLC release. It was an interesting experiment in a brand new universe that ate up 7 years of the studio's time, and now it would be best to just cut their losses, learn and understand what went wrong and why Starfield didn't resonate as much as their previous games, and move on to Elder Scrolls 6 and refocus on making that game the best it could possibly be. No point in continuing to support a game that's got a quarter of the active player base of another Bethesda game that's 14 years older, right? 14 years without a new Elder Scrolls game. Think about what that does to a man. But nope, Starfield is still kicking with new content and even a new port, and now thanks to Nvidia and the power of artificial intelligence, we will soon be able to play a version of Starfield inhabited by photorealistic, uncanny live Instagram filtered humans. Now this is what I needed in Starfield. I didn't feel like I was staring into the digital abyss enough in the original game, but these updates, plus NASA's Artemis 2 mission coincidentally happening as these updates are released, it had me feeling a bit spaced out. It made me morbidly interested in revisiting Starfield, as I was so underwhelmed by it back on release in 2024, I didn't even complete the main quest, which was odd for me, as a guy who usually bum rushes Bethesda main quests whenever I play their games. So I wanted to actually beat the game after 2 or so years of updates, and take a look at what makes Starfield so, well, unremarkable. And compared to other Bethesda and sci-fi space-themed games, to see why that is, and to see if maybe, just maybe, there's still some fun times and solid enjoyment to be had in the Starfield, and I'll mostly be focused on the game's setting, story, and its game world and immersion, rather than getting down to brass tacks on its mechanics, shooting, ship and base building, and its perk-based RPG-light progression systems, as they're all mostly par for the modern Bethesdan course, and they're actually some of Bethesda's solidest systems yet, especially the shooting, which just feels like an even more refined and modern version of Fallout 4 shooting. But this time, we get to use space-themed sci-fi guns, and even get to have astronaut gunfights in zero-gravity space stations, and low-gravity planets where you can float, jetpack, and shoot to your heart's content. And the game's leveling system is a mix of Fallout and Elder Scrolls, where it has a Fallout 4-esque perk chart that splits into 5 categories, and you can choose to invest in however you like. And each skill has 4 tiers that need to be unlocked by using that skill in-game a certain number of times like a challenge, like killing dudes with guns of certain types 100 times, destroying X number of ships, buying X number of ship parts and other goods, X times grav jumping, X times crafting, and so on. Plus, I really dig the custom tiered patch art for each skill. It all looks pretty sweet. But despite Starfield being Bethesda's biggest, newest, and broadest universe, it's somehow also its shallowest and least interesting one too. The game starts with you as a humble space miner for some company called Argos Extractors, who operate in the Settled Systems, the name used for all the planets and solar systems that humanity has colonized and explored by the year 2330. It's the field of stars in question, and it seems like a typical unremarkable space mining job, better than being a prisoner or a vault dweller for sure. But on our first day as a dust-covered laser miner, we find a crazy-looking artifact of unknown origin on this desolate moon that we're strip mining that seems to alter the gravity around it. And after reaching out for it, we're then brain blasted by the artifact, which then shows us visions of warping space and flashing galaxies that don't really make any sense, all the while your ears are bombarded with loud-ass orchestral music. And this artifact-powered seizure also knocked me out. So I wake up back in the main mining building, and I then make my character, who I named Luke Squawker, named after the evil Luke Skywalker clone with 2 U's in his name from a non-canonical Star Wars novel, of course. And we then head out to meet a buyer for this odd artifact who's on his way right now, who arrives on the classic Starfield ship, the Frontier. And this is Barrett, a member of Constellation, and he's a sort of lovable scoundrel type that acts nonchalant even in life or death situations. Think Han Solo if Han Solo was a treasure hunter and not a smuggler, but also if Han Solo was also married to Chewbacca, but Chewie also tragically died in the Galactic Civil War, you could then help Han process the trauma of losing Chewie. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So after a short conversation with Barrett, we realize that we, the player, are actually a very special little boy. And Barrett says that he saw these artifact visions himself too, which appear to happen to the first person who touches the artifact, it seems. So he then decides to have us join his Explorers Club, Constellation, whether we like it or not. This dude Barrett is adamant on you joining Constellation to an immersion-breaking level. He's like, dude, just shut the fuck up and start the main quest already. God damn. And he even gives me a cool Samsung Gear smartwatch as a Constellation initiation gift. But then some space bandits who belong to a space bandit faction called the Crimson Fleet swoop down and attack, as they were chasing Barrett because they thought he was some kind of rich treasure hunter or something. And we kill the evil astronauts. And we then take Barrett's ship as he sorts out letting bandits chase him to a mining colony. Or something. It's just an excuse to get us in the cockpit of this cool-looking ship. Barrett handing over the keys to the company's space car and the company robot to some random space miner he met 5 minutes ago, simply because he touched a mysterious rock and then had a galactic hallucination. Barrett is a very trusting fella. But we get attacked by Crimson Fleet gang squads of ships in orbit, so we then have to take out a Crimson Fleet base to get them to fuck off for good. But once we clear the base, we meet this evil Astro Bandit with a cool looking skull helmet, who says that they tried to rob Barrett, because since he's in Constellation, that must mean his ship has some sweet loot in it. But in reality, Constellation is low-key broke and most people treat them like a joke or some kind of cringy social club that's wasting time exploring frozen rocks and backwater systems. Granted that they even know that Constellation still exists. So in reality, the frontier is mostly empty and actually ant-infested. But once we ethnically cleanse the Crimson Fleet from this moon, we then head to Constellation's HQ, which is on the planet Jemison, named after the first African-American woman in space, Mae Jemison, of course. And there's a ton of fun name references all over this game. Far too many to list out here. And on Jemison is a city called New Atlantis, the capital of one of the major factions of the Starfield, the United Colonies. And now would be a good time to talk about Starfield's lore and the current status quo of the universe, to understand the field of stars we now find ourselves in, all of which we can learn in this handy UC museum that's in the basement of the mass government building. And it all starts on Earth naturally, where humans began exploring the stars around 2050, first landing humans on Mars around that time, and eventually establishing permanent colonies in the early 2100s, with the mining colony of Cydonia on Mars being humanity's first true permanent extraterrestrial colony, where humanity then expanded to Titan and other solar system planets and moons too. But shit starts getting real exciting in the 2140s, as humanity invents the grav drive, our much needed space travel MacGuffin sci-fi technology engine that will allow humans to jump out of our home solar system and into new ones all across the galaxy, as the grav drive allows spaceships to essentially summon localized event horizons by, quote, pulling and warping the gravity around the ship, which humanity can then use to jump to all new solar systems with, crossing hundreds of light years in just a few seconds long loading screen. Wow. Grav drives also conveniently create planet-like gravity fields for ships while they're in space, so you can walk around them normally while on board and you don't float around your ship, and your bone density doesn't hollow out from an extended period of time in zero gravity. And I believe if you disable a ship's grav drive and then board it, the ship won't have any gravity anymore, which is a nice detail. But if that's the case, then how did the pre-grav drive ship at Paradiso have gravity? Who knows? But basically, gravity is essentially magic in Starfield, and the sooner you realize that, the more sense the story will make. But anyway, this amazing discovery in gravity bending allowed humanity to explore deep into space and kicked off an exciting era of space exploration and travel to new planets that humanity never imagined they'd ever be able to reach before, blazing new frontiers and manifesting destiny and all that good final frontiersman shit. However, this fun and hopeful era for humanity is quickly ruined in 2150, when scientists revealed to the people of Earth that Earth's magnetosphere is rapidly decaying and will collapse in around 50 years, which will cause the atmosphere to essentially come loose and to dissipate into space, leaving Earth as a dead and dry rock bathing in a 24/7 UV radiation shower, which will also extinguish all life on Earth too, naturally. And this announcement rightfully freaks everyone the fuck out, and humans start mass leaving Earth on their starships and start exploring other star systems in hope of finding habitable planets for humanity to make a new home on, eventually finding the Earth-like planet Jemison in the Alpha Centauri system, and founding the city of New Atlantis around this time too. In the United Colonies, or the UC, is also established on Earth around this time, a new sort of global government that subsumes all its members into an English-speaking monoculture New World Order, tasked with managing the evacuation and relocation of humans to new planets, with the UC choosing New Atlantis as its capital. And the UC even began issuing proclamations to allow for the creation of non-UC colonies in newly explored star systems. Letting opportunistic space colonists establish their own spacefaring factions outside of UC jurisdiction? Surely this won't lead to interfactional conflict later on down the line, right? And this proclamation is taken up on by several explorers, including a rocket scientist named Solomon Coe, who set out on his own and discovered the Cheyenne system, which contained a habitable planet called Aquila, where he established the uncreatively named Aquila City, near where he first landed on the planet. And a few decades later, co-offers the Volii system of mutual defense alliance, Volii being the home of Neon, a whole city built on a fishing platform located on an ocean planet. It was first established as a remote fishing platform by the Xenofresh Corporation. However, in a development ripped right out of BioShock, and I'm not even being slightly facetious here, Xenofresh discovered that a species of alien fish called chasm bass excretes a natural psychotropic substance from its body that would come to be called Aurora, which appears to be a mix between LSD and cocaine, and it acts almost exactly the same as Jet in Fallout 4, as it slows down time to allow you to line up some shots. But in the actual in-universe lore, Aurora just seems to make you trip balls and want to party with the world's ugliest club dancers that kind of look like they're dressed up as alien STDs under a microscope or something. But I guess that's a bit better than turning into a murderous deformed tweaker, I guess. And Xenofresh would go on to make a killing off their alien fish piss drug, and Neon is now a major economic powerhouse in the settled systems, and is now home to the headquarters of several major megacorporations in the settled systems, and it feels sort of like a mix between Rapture from Bioshock and Night City from Cyberpunk 2077. And well, Cheyenne and Neon agreed to an alliance, which marked the founding of the Freestar Collective, the other major faction in the settled systems, which unlike the UC, which has a central government body that projects power from its capital on Jemison, where citizenship is only granted to people who serve in the UC military or in the UC Vanguard like it's the Starship Troopers government. The Freestar Collective is instead a decentralized government headed by a council of representatives, which consists of planetary governors, megacorp CEOs, and a few doctors. There's less regulation, taxes, and there's far more autonomy for member planets and systems, but megacorps can wield uncontested power with only the Freestar Rangers to keep them in check. And even then, the Rangers have to play nice most of the time, lest they lose the support of their economic powerhouses. But only 5 years after the Freestar Collective was established, it was already in open war with the United Colonies, after the UC parked a medical space station called the Clinic in the orbit of the planet Depala in the Nerion system, and the Nerians thought the UC put the station there as a prelude to an inevitable annexation of their solar system by the UC, which they can't be having for, I don't know, taxes suck reasons? Big government bad? Something like that? It's not super clear. So they demanded that the UC move the station elsewhere, and the UC says, nah, I'm good actually. I'll stay right here. So the Nerians then voted to join the Freestar Collective in an act of defiance, and the Collective approved of this vote by mobilizing their fleet to support the Nerion system. So the UC mobilizes in return and sends a fleet to Nerion as well, which then starts the Nerion War, the sort of World War I of the Starfield universe, where the war then goes on to last a grueling 20 whole years, as the better equipped and professional UC Navy was unable to pin down and destroy the elusive Freestar fleet, as the Freestars were experts at using guerrilla-style starship attacks, where they'd ambush UC fleet ships and then quickly grab jump away to escape. Man, space Afghanistan sounds horrible. But the UC was eventually able to corner and destroy the Freestar fleet, effectively winning them the war. However, by the time that they did, UC citizens were so fed up with the war and were so filled with anti-war wokeness that they were protesting and rioting in even New Atlantis to end the war and stop the aggression. So the UC and FC signed the Treaty of Nerion, which gave extremely generous concessions to the Freestar Collective despite their apparent military defeat, such as allowing Nerion to join the Freestar Collective anyway, and they even handed over the Clinic to the Freestar Collective too, in exchange for the UC getting mineral rights on select planets as war reparations, along with the declaration that the UC and FC will be restricted to 3 systems each, and may not colonize any more than that, the UC holding the Alpha Centauri, Sol, and Wolf systems, and the FC holding Cheyenne, Volii, and now Nerion. Oh, and also, while the Nerion War was raging, Earth's magnetosphere finally dissipated into nothing and was reduced to a lifeless, desolate rock, but only a small percentage of Earth's population had the resources or privilege to actually board a starship and escape, as it seems massive evacuation ships were pretty uncommon, and most of the people who escaped Earth were people in the UC who had access to UC ships, people who were already living in space or on another planet like Jemison, and people who had the means to purchase their own grav-drive power ships to escape on their own. But billions of people were still left on Earth when it lost its magnetosphere. And those billions of people died alongside the Earth when the magnetosphere finally fizzled out into nothing. But fuck the Earth, we got galactic war squabbles to get to. Now, if it seems like this oddly restrictive treaty that puts a hard cap on space colonization, that also unduly rewards a losing military, would eventually lead to another conflict down the line as one of the factions eventually does an illegal expansion, then you'd be absolutely right. As 90 years later, the Freestar Collective established a farm on the planet Vesta in the Lunara system, which the UC then saw as a brazen violation of the Nerion Treaty by expanding into a 4th system. And when pressed, the FC's response was, nah, it's just an outpost, come on man, relax. And talks then broke down from there, with the UC deciding to preemptively attack Lunara's new FC colony, starting the Colony War, which was a much shorter conflict, only lasting 3 years, compared to the 20-year-long slog of the Nerion War. But it was far more brutal and devastating. The idyllic planet of Nero was devastated by the war, as after being captured by the UC, the Freestar Collective progressively destroyed massive swaths of the planet with WMDs and mech assaults trying to get it back. Mars was attacked by Freestar Collective forces, and new devastating weapons of galactic war were employed, such as the Freestar Collective mainly using Titanfall-ass mechs, and the UC using mind control controlled alien beasts, or Xenos, as Starfieldian residents call them, as biological weapons, and why the UC didn't also have mechs despite being just as advanced and as manufacturally capable as the Freestar Collective is beyond my understanding at this moment. So feel free to enlighten me in the comments if you know the answer. Starfield does indeed have aliens, just not any intelligent ones. They're all either alien bugs, alien fish, or alien dinosaurs with animal-level intelligence at best. However, the most fearsome Xeno is aptly named the Terrormorph, which not only is an extremely strong and lethal killer alien beast, it can also use psychic powers to mind-dominate lesser beasts and even people. And it also seemingly has the ability to appear on planets that have been settled for long enough at complete random and start wreaking havoc at a moment's notice, with a horde of Terrormorphs overrunning the UC city of Londinium during the Colony War, with the UC eventually bombing their own Londinian spaceport to prevent the Terrormorphs from escaping the planet, condemning all the stranded residents to be hunted down and torn to shreds by them, with the whole planet quarantined by the UC, with the Terrormorphs and the fallout of the destruction of Londinium being the main plotline of the UC Vanguard questline. But anyway, the Colony War came to an end when the UC fleet tried to attack Cheyenne to deal a decapitating strike against the FC fleet, where they seemingly had the FC dead to rights. But right as they were about to win, in a sort of reverse Dunkirk moment, FC civilians all boarded their ships and rallied together to join the fight against the UC, with this friendship as magic-ass fleet successfully repelling the UC's military fleet, who allegedly had lost all their will to fight when humble space farmers pulled up on them lasers out, and the UC and FC fleets were mostly destroyed. But the FC then sued for peace after the Battle of Cheyenne, and both factions signed the armistice, the backbone of the current status quo of the Starfield world. Both sides heavily reduced their standing armies, and they outlawed mechs and Xeno weapons, with their data being kept under lock and key in a high-tech vault, with the 3 keys to the vault being held by diplomats from the UC, FC, and House Varun. And I'll talk about these snake guys later, to ensure that mech and Xeno weapon data stays locked up unless some exceptional circumstances arise. And the UC then established the Vanguard as its own civilian military force, copying the civilian-sourced Armada method that won the Battle of Cheyenne. Also, the FC demanded the trials and subsequent executions of 3 senior UC officers, whom they believe acted extra evilly in the war, with most notably among them, the man who ordered Londinian's destruction and the former Supreme Commander of the UC Navy, Francois Sinan, who is known by his based Crusader Latin gamertag as Vae Victis, which in English means woe to the defeated. However, despite peace being established yet again in the Starfield, there's still high tensions between the UC and the FC, which seems like it could easily lead to yet another war sometime in the future, as this armistice failed to set any strong peace terms yet again, with only a split 3-way key to a weapons vault being the main deterrent to another war, with the vault itself located on Jemison in the heart of New Atlantis, giving the UC extremely favorable and lopsided control of the main peace-enforcing aspect of the armistice, along with some other things they got hiding down there that I'll talk about later. And the galaxy as a whole is still recovering from the Colony War's devastation, even almost 20 years after it came to a close, leaving the settled systems in a sort of Wild West/reconstruction period, where the large factions' armies are weakened, and we can see ruins of space stations and ships lost in the Colony War just floating around in several solar systems, and hordes of pirates like the Crimson Fleet, dangerous mercs like the Ecliptics, and plenty of other various bandit-esque spacers, scavengers, and shipjackers plague the settled systems like rats, creating that classic Bethesda feel of there being more bandits than actual normal citizens in the game world. But with that background lore spiel out of the way, we landed the UC capital, and New Atlantis is definitely one of the most striking cities Bethesda has ever made. It's got a cool central mass building, some nice verticality with huge areas and tall ass buildings, and the whole city sits on a cliff with a central waterfall that we can look up and gawk at from the spaceport. And it kind of channels how striking Solitude looked in Skyrim, what with it being a whole city on top of a massive natural rock arch. But it's also fairly small for what's supposed to be a major galactic capital, especially for the capital of a major spacefaring civilization, which I know is due to hardware limitations and engine limitations, of course. And the actual city looks large and impressive as far as Bethesda cities go, but it also caps Starfield's scope, as it makes the player realize, okay, right, this is as big as cities in the settled systems are gonna get, which could have been helped a bit by, maybe, I don't know, making distant but inaccessible city districts that cover most of the distant map, or do something like the Outer Worlds did, where the city is the whole map, but you can only access certain parts of it. Just something to at least give the illusion that this is a city that hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of people live in. Like, I'm not expecting Bethesda to make a nice city-sized metropolis for just one of their faction's capitals, of course. But I also just find it extremely hard to buy that the United Colony's capital city is this relatively small, as it makes me believe the settled systems are severely underpopulated or something, like post-apocalypse levels of depopulation, especially when the largest city in the entire settled systems is on par with, like, Cleveland, Ohio. Plus, making the city larger with distant districts could also highlight a discrepancy between the UC citizens who live in the bougiest parts of New Atlantis and the non-citizen UC residents, as only approved citizens can purchase property in New Atlantis, and no person is ever born a citizen of the UC, and they have to obtain their citizenship through service in the Vanguard or via other exceptional services to the UC. But New Atlantis is pretty idyllic, and there seems to be no real class friction between the citizens and the non-citizens. And not exploring this militarized culture more deeply, and sure, we got places like the Well in New Atlantis, which is definitely shabbier and shittier than the surface city, but it's also mostly just a really old district of the city, and it's still bustling with people and businesses. And the most we get is that the residents down here are poorer, and they get help from an altruistic atheist charity. But that's about it, with little nuance or drawbacks to be seen or expounded on, outside of some vague military cruelty like using aliens to kill people, and their eagerness to fight wars with the Freestar Collective. And we don't really get a better understanding as to why an average Joe in the settled systems would fight and die for the Freestar Collective or against the UC in general, beyond, I don't like annoying government bureaucracy and overreach, and I want to settle on whatever planet I please because of independence and manifest destiny type shit. Because as far as I've seen, there seems to be very little drawback to living in the UC, beyond it having a Starship Troopers-like citizenship through military service system, and a strong centralized government that can be annoying and restrictive at times, sure. But in Starship Troopers, well, at least in the movie, I'm not gonna pretend like you, or me, or even the Bethesda writers themselves have actually read the original Starship Troopers book. But in the movie, this citizenship via service system turns Earth's government into a jingoistic military oligarchy that sends young people into the meat grinder against alien bugs for little to no gain after a false flag attack on Earth. Meanwhile, the UC just goes 2 rounds of Hell in a Cell with the Freestar Collective, and they fend off House Faroon when they kicked off their Huron Blackheart-ass kill 7 billion people Cosmic Snake Crusade. And the worst they get is being mean when waging war by using aliens to kill their enemies, and having a fairly relentless and aggressive warfare doctrine. And government bureaucracy is super annoying, am I right, man? I mean, they fought the FC for 20 years over a space station dispute. But it's not like the Freestar Collective is a wholly innocent and morally superior faction that the UC is just brutalizing for no good reason, or has no hope at defeating. As the game's writing makes both factions fairly morally gray actors in the wars, and no side is truly at fault or is the clear aggressor. It's that Skyrim Civil War styled, both sides not great writing. Cause sure, the Freestar Collective is fighting for the freedom to settle on any planet they want without government red tape, I suppose. But they also, whether indirectly or not, also fight for unfettered, corrupt corporate power, who operate legal drug distribution networks for huge profits, and act like thuggish Cyberpunk 2077 corpos who will lie, kill, steal, and cheat their ways into mountains of credits, which is like the whole crux of the Ryujin Industries questline. So there's traces of nuance and interesting politics here, but it ends up being too simplified and sanitized to really dig much into and analyze. It's essentially militaristic technocrats versus colonialist libertarians, both sides fighting for vague ideals about how strongly space governments should monitor and restrict colonization of new worlds, with little in the way of interesting nuance or deep stories as to why people would fight and die for a faction like the Freestar Collective, or even the United Colonies. We see no interesting propaganda or arguments made by NPCs beyond some flavor of big government good or big government bad. And I find that incredibly disappointing for me, as someone who loves deep lore and feeling like these digital worlds actually have deep, complex histories. But with Starfield, the lore is so straightforward and simple, it's all just a few paragraphs of bare essential background lore that all fits neatly into a tutorial exposition museum. And we of course get some real close looks at the New Atlantis citizens, who there are a decent amount of just wandering around New Atlantis to make it feel more alive and busy than any previous Bethesda city. But man, these guys are notoriously ugly and chopped. They all got a soulless, 1,000-yard gaze and flat, washed-out textures that are noticeably worse than the fully detailed NPCs that you can actually talk to. Plus, their clothes and outfits are complete travesties. Like, dude, what the fuck are you wearing? But for now, we reach the Constellation Clubhouse, and we use our cool new watch to open the door, and we get inside Constellation's HQ, which is a pretty sweet pad they got. It's got a nice mix of spacefaring NASA punk technology, mixed with an antique-styled study you expect a rich old explorer to own. It's a nice mix of classic and futuristic exploration aesthetics. Plus, the clutter in this game is actually really good. There's a ton of high-quality miscellaneous items on desks and shelves and all over the settled systems, most of which have full physics and world persistence. And in my personal opinion, it all looks really good. It makes Starfield feel quite tangible, interactive, and lived in. Something Bethesda has always been quite good at. Nobody stacks cheese wheels and decorates a digital shelf quite like Todd Howard. And we put our artifact into their central collection, which then forms a floating hoop shape suspended by some small glowing dots. So it seems that gathering all the artifacts will create some sort of floating alien doohickey. And we then meet the members of Constellation. We already met Barrett and Vasco, the robot mascot of Constellation, but we now meet Sarah Morgan, the current chairlady of Constellation, who's a former UC pilot who loves nothing more than exploring the stars and chasing the unknown. And she's also aggressively British.
Because we're committed to exploring space, Humanity may have settled the stars, but that doesn't mean we should stop diving into the unknown.
So why don't you crawl back up your mum's fanny and die?
There's Noel, the nerd of the group who leads Constellation's research into the artifacts. There's Mateo, the theologian of the Sanctum Universum, and he's essentially a religious archaeologist of old Earth. And it's way less interesting than it sounds. They just essentially believe that God is real, but we have to find him out in the universe. And he hopes that these artifacts can lead humans to figuring out the secrets of the universe. He's kind of boring, I'm not gonna lie. And Walter Stroud, one of the two CEOs of Stroud Eklund, a ship manufacturing company that specializes in making high quality and luxury ship parts, which makes them highly coveted by space bandits, and the constant shipjacking of Stroud Eklund ships is giving the company a bad rap. And Walter is the main financial benefactor of Constellation. He straight up calls himself Constellation's wallet. And he joined this Explorers Club because he was greatly inspired by the writings of its founder, a man named Sebastian Banks, especially his farewell speech, where Banks proclaimed his love for exploration and then set out on one last expedition into the unknown, even though he was an old-ass man who'd certainly die on such an ambitious quest, where he then vanished and was never seen again. And you gotta respect the guy who loves exploring so much he committed suicide while doing it. And if you're thinking, this could actually be a pretty cool setup to a later side quest to find out what happened to Constellation's founder. Like, what if you could find his old ship floating in a far-off star system? Or maybe find a base he established on a far-flung remote planet? Well, if you think that, keep thinking. Unfortunately, such a quest does not exist. There's also other members of Constellation that aren't currently here, like Vladimir Sol, a former Crimson Fleet pirate who mans the Eye, a deep space scanner and station owned by Constellation that he uses to point us towards artifact gravitational anomalies, along with Sam Coe, a single father and direct descendant of the famous explorer and Freestar Collective founding father Solomon Coe, which makes him something of Settled Systems royalty, as most Freestar Collective residents are awestruck by his surname when they meet him. Although Sam resents his status as an unofficial prince of space and just wants to explore new places, be treated like a normal guy, dress like a space cowboy, and take care of his daughter, Cora. And then finally, there's Andreja, the newest member of Constellation and also the most aloof one, her being a secret member of House Varun, who aren't exactly well liked in the Settled Systems, and thus, she's shy and distrusting of others, but she's pretty headstrong and assertive about the things she believes in, and she's also the hottest one. And Constellation is our main protagonist faction of Starfield, and is the source of most of our companions, and all of our potential lovers. Ooh yeah. Who are all solid companions and who are likable enough, and they all have semi-tragic backstories that we can help resolve through their companion quests. All the voice acting is pretty well done too. But they're also nothing truly special. They aren't exactly Veronica or Arcade Gannon levels of writing quality. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel my heartstrings being tugged on by these guys at times. Even if only barely. They got some of the better writing in the entire game. And there's also less important characters that you can assign to your ship's crew, like your old mining boss Lynn, your co-worker Heller, random dudes you meet in seedy clubs.
That's right.
And of course the adoring fan, if you take his trait in character creation. But these recruitable crewmates have nowhere near the depth or importance as the Constellation companions, and they're mostly here to help augment your ship skills with their own skills. But anyway, these artifacts are truly fascinating, but we need to find more of them to get to the bottom of this. So we work with Sarah and Andreja to hunt down some artifacts, and we head to Aquila City with Sam Coe, the heart of the Freestar Collective, where he bickers with his politician dad like a rebellious teenager. His pops is all like, "Sam, you need to lock in and work in government like a proper co-man." And Sam says, "Screw you, Dad. I want to explore the stars and be my own man. Fuck politics." And Aquila City represents the settler/frontiersman aspect of the Freestar Collective, as the whole city looks like a fortified space western-styled frontier town. And the first thing you encounter in Aquila City is an outlaw gang robbing a bank with western-looking Freestar Rangers trying to sort out the situation. Yeah, the Wild West influence isn't exactly subtle here. And it's kinda cool, I suppose. Bethesda is clearly trying to channel a sort of grittier frontiersman vibe that contrasts with the futuristic spacefaring technology. It's kinda like Mos Eisley, if you will. But the western theming is again purely aesthetic with little lore or world building to back it up. Besides, us Freestar Collectivites love my freedom and love to settle and explore without annoying government restrictions. And to me, it seems like Bethesda just wanted space cowboys in their space game, and they worked backwards to create the Freestar Collective and the Rangers from this idea, who all look like western sheriffs in space, complete with large gold metal badges and long NASA-punkified duster jackets, and they're tasked with being the only central law enforcement force in the whole Freestar Collective, as other Freestar Collective member worlds have their own police forces like in Neon, but if they don't, most Freestar planets are just essentially lawless, and each person has to protect themselves from spacers and other thug bandit types on their own, as the Freestar Rangers only have around a dozen or so active Rangers at once, so only 12 guys and gals to enforce the law across all of Freestar space? Seems like nowhere near enough Rangers. I'd assume they need closer to like 1,200 Rangers, not fucking 12. That crime report backlog must be immense. Also, Aquila City suffers from the New Atlantis problem of being too small for its own good, and at least New Atlantis had large skyscrapers to sell you on the illusion that's supposed to be a large modern city. You're telling me this walled frontier town is one of the largest cities and cultural centers of the entire settled systems? I mean, as a frontier town or fortified outpost, it would actually work amazingly well. It's fairly dense and pretty busy. But I just can't buy it as a major settlement of the settled systems. A city where half the population live in prefabbed homes just plopped down on the ground? How did these guys defeat the full might of the UC Navy when their city looks like a frontier outpost at best, and they have large outlaw gangs living right outside their city walls operating with impunity and robbing banks like it's 1899? You beat them? Through the power of friendship. Just have your gritty, hardworking, sneaky, athletic daughter dater settlers and citizens all team up and defeat the UC for you. That's how. It's just such a whatever and honestly kind of silly faction that more or less just boils down to cowboys in space. And a little bit of, remember Solomon Coe? He was a pretty cool guy, right? So if you don't want to LARP as John Marston with a spaceship instead of a horse, there's really nothing else here to dig into and get invested in lore-wise or story-wise beyond the Freestar Rangers faction quest, which is more of a conspiracy investigation plot than a true Western gunslinging adventure. Plus, the space cowboy hats and duster jackets don't even really look that good. But anyway, rant aside, we also get Barrett back from this surprisingly chill Crimson Fleet goon, using some ridiculous persuasion, and we then expand our alien rock collection until Vlad says that he picked up a gravitational anomaly that matches the signature of one of the artifacts. And when we go to check the place out, we discover some kind of strange, non-human looking temple on the planet's surface that's the cause of our anomaly, but we have no idea who built this thing and how, but it looks alien and ancient. And inside is a large, gravityless room with a spinning hoop doohickey in the center. And we then have to flow into these coalescing spinning star blobs 5 times until the spinning hoop doohickey aligns and gives off some kind of vortex effect. All the while, some awesome booming music is playing that really hypes you up for whatever's about to happen. It's some really good shit. The sound is so powerful it almost sounds like it's peaking the speakers, but it's not. And when we enter the hoops, we seemingly absorb all the tiny stars that it's radiating. And we then see an intense galactic vision of a galaxy that's highlighted in an odd shape. And when we wake up, we find ourselves outside the temple, and I can now press Z to use a gravitational field attack, where all gravity is removed from the area I targeted, leaving enemies helplessly floating and open to get lit up by my space guns. Which is pretty cool, but wait a minute. Isn't this just Skyrim shouts again?
Starfield.
It is. It literally is just space shouts minus the need to actually open your mouth and shout. A commanding hand extension is more than enough to activate your star powers. It's even got the exact same cooldown system that Skyrim used, but instead of dragon souls, you got artifacts and quantum essence, and instead of word walls, you got temples, which, by the way, is the same float into star clusters and then enter the hoop minigame every single time. And then afterwards, you gotta fight a guy with a gun outside as a short mini-boss. So if you want to get all the powers, you gotta find all the artifacts, get the locations of each anomaly from Vlad, land on the planet, find the temple, which you're supposed to do with your scanner and look for distortions, but you can now just open up the surface menu to instantly locate the temple. It's pretty hard to miss. And then you hoof it on over to the temple, do the floating minigame, and then obtain the power, and rinse and repeat for each power and corresponding artifact. But later on, you start getting junked by some unwanted guests, and I'll talk about that soon. But it's the same thing every single time. And it's a boring and repetitive chore where you navigate layered, unintuitive menus, beeline across a boring landscape, do the slow floating touch the star cluster minigame, and then leave. And these things aren't even naturally woven into the regular gameplay loop like they were in Skyrim, where you could find word walls at the end of dungeons or at the top of mountains guarded by dragons while you were out exploring, and you gotta go out of your way to do the checklist of temples to fully power up. And it's just not very fun or interesting at all, and it's comically repetitive. Like, can you at least do something else besides float around into star clusters? No? Okay. But anyway, once we realize that the artifacts can lead us to temples that contain cool space magic powers, we continue looking for more, of course. This time teaming up with Walter to make a deal for an artifact on Neon, where you will likely first visit this major city of the settled systems. Neon is kind of a shithole. It's got rampant crime, both individual and organized, with large gangs operating within it, and it's ruled by mega corporations with Xenofresh at the top, as their CEO, Benjamin Bayou, is the Neon administrator and effective dictator of the place, and he controls the flow of Aurora, which is exclusively sold on Neon and cannot be smuggled off planet without serious legal repercussions. So we got corrupt security forces in the pocket of a billionaire dictator, rampant crime, gangs, and corporations that wield disproportionate power to act with impunity to commit crimes such as corporate espionage, sabotage, theft, and even murder. So there's a lot of potential for an interesting city here that shows how lax Freestar laws and government regulations can lead to huge corporate prosperity at the cost of average people being brutalized by crime and drugs. But it also doesn't really say much about the consequences of such fast and loose business laws and regulations beyond crime is probably bad, and drugs are also probably bad. And Neon could have been a cool city. The concept art is actually really great, and it looks more like a proper city on a platform. It kind of got hosed on the final product though. It looks like a slum on stilts. But despite all that, this would still be a pretty cool and unique city if it wasn't completely mogged by Cyberpunk 2077's Night City, which is way larger, more detailed, has no loading screens, and has far more interesting and complex cutthroat politics than Neon could ever hope to have. And the main area of Neon is essentially just a glorified hallway with some big neon signage for all the corporations and stores that reside there, and it's completely sunned by a game that came out 3 years before it. And I really wish I didn't have to make this comparison, but it really does just feel like a pale imitation of Night City. And most of the time I spent on Neon had me feeling like I was playing a poor man's version of Cyberpunk. But we do the deal with Walter and obtain the artifact. But we learned that our seller had actually stolen the artifact from Slayton Aerospace after they fired him. So Mr. Slayton himself sends some goons to kill us and take his artifact back, and even impounds my space whip so I can't leave the planet. So we're then forced to confront him for trying to kill us and trapping us in this dump. And when we do, he essentially says, "Why shouldn't I kill you right now and take my artifact back?" To which I respond, "Well, you can try, but we've killed everyone you tried to throw at us so far." And Slayton is like, "Damn, I guess you're right. You are pretty damn scary. I ought to stop trying to kill you, or my ass is cooked." And he instead has us deal with our seller, where we can either imprison, spare, or kill him. And I let him live, I guess. We're kind of doing the same thing he did, and he stole the artifact because he was fired after 10 years of dedicated work without barely a thank you. And I can relate to that, so I let him go. Although I don't know how this choice really matters to me at all. He's just some disposable jabroni-ass NPC to me. And after I show this guy mercy, Slayton is all like, "Wow, empathy. That's rare around here. Anyway, you're free to go." "Really, man? Just like that? I'm robbing you of your priceless artifact and getting away with killing several of your employees with no repercussions? You're letting me walk? Alright, sweet." My only explanation is that he must sense my overwhelming protagonist aura and knows I'd obliterate him in a fight. But as we finally leave Neon, we're suddenly stopped by this alien butt plug looking ship, and it demands that we hand over our artifacts and cease our search for them immediately. And when I ask them to identify themselves, whoever is speaking just says that they're the quote, Starborn.
Are the Starborn.
Man, Starfield is really not beating the "it's just Skyrim again" allegations. But this Starborn that we're speaking to refuses to answer any of my questions about the artifacts and tells us to give up, shut up, and hand over the artifacts, which we can't be having. So we grab jump away to escape these space dragonborns. But now we have unknown Starborn goons and alien butt plugs trying to rob us of our sweet artifacts. But that won't stop us. And I also get another artifact from this Russian space thrift store owner guy, after I ask him really nicely. But once we return to the lodge with the artifacts, we get a harrowing transmission from the Eye, where Vlad says a Starborn appeared from nowhere, shot up the place, and mortally wounded Sam Coe, who was leaking blood like a cracked dam. And we hear this Starborn speak to us, who seems to be a different, but eviler Starborn who calls himself the Hunter. And he's heading for the lodge next. So we have to choose to either head up to the Eye to save Sam, or stay behind to gather up the artifacts and escape the lodge together. And I decide to stay behind and gather the artifacts, and the Hunter then appears in the lodge and attacks. But he's pretty strong, so I can't exactly gun him down yet. And we have to flee through New Atlantis as he chases us, the Hunter causing a ton of chaos and destruction as he teleports around and lights me up with his laser rifle. However, we manage to escape to our ship and travel to the Eye, but we find Sam dead as a doornail. Shit, we're too late. As in this mission, at least one Constellation companion is guaranteed to die at the location you don't go to. And it's also the companion you have the highest affinity with at the moment, which I guess was Sam Coe for me. And if I went to the Eye, Barrett would have died at the lodge. So at least on first playthroughs, at least one companion will be permanently cooked by this quest. But after we flee the Eye, the Hunter confronts us in his own butt-plug ship, but then he decides to chill out and back off on us, and to let us continue gathering artifacts as he's curious about us or something? He says that I may have a bigger role in this than he expected, whatever that means. But at least it's very convenient that this teleporting, potentially alien asshole isn't trying to drill me anymore, I suppose. And anyway, Mateo then finally gets to do something. As before the Hunter attacked us, he referred to something he called the Unity, and Mateo suggests that we speak to his theologian boss, a man named Keeper Aquilius, as to what Unity could possibly mean, as Mateo claims that he invokes the term Unity pretty often in his sermons. So we go and speak to the guy, who seems quite wise about Unity topics, and he tells us to speak to an imprisoned Varun zealot and a guy from an atheistic humanitarian outfit called the House of Enlightenment, where they relate to us stories of a quote-unquote pilgrim who came into contact with the religion's early members and founders. This Varun jihadist lady says that Janan Varun once fought the same guy 4 times over 120 days, and the House of Enlightenment guy says that they had an unknown man come in and grill them on their moral beliefs, constantly arguing for duality and emphasizing the importance of the number 2, which we relay to Aquilius, who then somehow immediately cracks the code on these esoteric stories and reveals the numbers in these legends correspond to a planet in the Indum system, getting the coordinates from the Varun story and the planet from the House of Enlightenment story. This dude is a goddamn prodigy, I guess, and seems to know much more about unity and esoteric space religion knowledge than he's letting on. He deduced all that shit on his first try. Maybe Emil showed him the script early or something. And when we go to the discovery coordinates and system, we find a place called Pilgrim's Rest, where we read notes from this pilgrim, who seems to be a galaxy-transcending being, who contemplates actually staying behind to build something meaningful instead of just constantly traveling to new places. So it seems that this pilgrim was actually a Starborn himself, but we still don't know exactly the full extent of their powers yet, and what becoming a Starborn actually entails, and how to actually do it. But the pilgrim's notes points us towards the, quote, scorpion sting, so we head there. Once I get my hands on a juicier grav drive to make the jump, we find the stinger in question, and it's an odd-looking monument in the shape of a scorpion, naturally. And we do a confusing spotlight puzzle that points us towards the last star in the Scorpius constellation, which leads us to the Hunter's ship just chilling out in this remote system. And he seems pretty chill for now, and he actually requests us to parlay with him on his ship. And the first Starborn we met, the emissary who tried to shake us down for our artifacts after we were wheeling and dealing with Walter and Neon, is here too. So we dock and meet the Star Brothers, where the Hunter then reveals that the Unity is opening up to us, and he let me live after the attack on New Atlantis to see what I was capable of, as I usually don't even make it this far. Don't usually make it this far. What do you mean by that? And the emissary then reveals himself to be Sam Coe? What? Well, actually, the emissary will be whatever companion died in the Hunter's attack, and it's also revealed that the Hunter is an evil version of Keeper Aquilius with a sinister eye scar. What the hell is going on here? Well, Alt Sam will finally tell us. He finally reveals what the Unity is. It's a sort of portal to an infinite number of parallel universes, which can be accessed after all the artifacts in a given universe are assembled. And those who pass through the Unity then become Starborn, where they get sent back in time to the start of the game and can do the artifact hunt all over again in the new universe. And each new universe increases their star powers and abilities as they do the temples over and over again and they grind out more levels. As each new loop allows you to unlock new tiers of space powers by redoing the temples, which has given rise to a sort of Starborn arms race, where all Starborns across all universes. It's kind of unclear how many Starborn there actually are though. The emissary speaks of like-minded Starborns he's allied with, but we never actually see them. All the Starborns seem to work independently, with their only goal being to rob and kill me. But I guess the number of parallel universes is infinite. So there's theoretically infinite Starborns too, I suppose. Some D4C shit, you know? It's all infinity all the way down. And these Starborns are in competition to clear universes to increase their powers, until I assume one all-powerful Starborn would remain, who would be a universe-hopping entity with godlike space powers that would make him practically invincible, made exponentially stronger than an average human, from hundreds of universe loops of artifact hunting and temple star cluster floating minigaming. And I'm honestly kind of surprised I don't get super bored after like loop 2 though, but I digress. What the actual end goal of the Starborn artifact arms race is though, is still completely unknown, even to the Hunter and the Emissary, who have both gone through hundreds of universes with seemingly no end in sight. They still don't even know who made the temples and the artifacts or why. We simply know the temple's creators as the creators. Wow, creative. And we don't know if these creators are ancient humans, an alien race, a godlike entity, or just the Bethesda devs themselves. But regardless, these two chucklefucks here represent the two Starborn factions that are vying for control of the artifacts. Emissary here wants to ally with like-minded concerned Starborns to gather up the artifacts and control who is allowed to access the Unity, as well as to prevent brutal conflict between competing Starborns and to prevent evil dudes like the Hunter from gaining access to magic space powers. However, the Hunter represents the other Starborn philosophy of simple might makes right, and whoever gathers the artifacts first should be allowed to enter the Unity, with no other rules beyond that. Just pure selfish power hoarding and callous indifference to any who would oppose him. And is this not just Jedi vs Sith? Just replace the Force with the Temple space powers? And on one side you got a group of Starborn who want to control and administer access to space powers in the Unity through careful consideration of potential Star guys, versus self-interested, unscrupulous Star bastards who only seek to increase their own magic space power levels? It just seems very familiar, to say the least. But this Unity exposition and lore dump is all they got for me for now. And as I leave, Emissary gives me a lead on another artifact on the old Earth's moon, while also ominously telling me that I'll find some answers there as well. So I arrive at the moon, which then points me towards an old NASA facility on Earth. So we touch down on our now barren and dead home planet, and I see this massive NASA launch tower sticking up from the desolate dunes of the dead Earth. And it's certainly striking and even unsettling to look at for me personally. But these ruins are also kind of ridiculous too, as it's just the launch tower and no other ruins whatsoever. Like, how did everything else get vaporized into sand? But this tower is still more or less intact. And this goes for the other Earth locations too, as if you find some select in-game books about old Earth locations, you unlock a marker on Earth that will allow you to see the ruins of an iconic Earth building, like the Empire State Building, the London Shard, the Burj Khalifa, the Gateway Arch, and several others, which is a really cool concept. And these ruined buildings are genuinely unsettling to look at, as they just uncannily stick out of the dead Earth's surface amongst a desolate desert of nothingness. But it's also just so ridiculous, as there's just no other ruins at all, just a mostly intact building sticking out of the sand like a stick. It's unsettling and makes no sense to me. Even a few building shells and foundations sticking out of the sand nearby would go a long way in making these ruins feel more believable. Because otherwise, did these iconic skyscrapers get coated with space vacuum protective glaze or something? And this has just been a nitpick of mine ever since Starfield released, because it's an interesting idea that's executed in such a half-baked way, and all there is to do is just gawk at the building and pick up a snow globe. Which, thanks, I guess. But anyway, we explore the old NASA facility, which has a really cool museum setup which I thought was incredibly based, as a NASA enjoyer myself. It has exhibits for historic NASA rockets and landers like Apollo and Gemini, and we even get a classic silver Mercury spacesuit, even though they kind of look like pajamas a bit. We also discover through some logs the dark truth about Earth's atmospheric obliteration. We learn that the grav drive was invented by a one Dr. Victor Isa, voiced by Bellathor of General Goods Store fame.
My name is Dr. Victor Isa, and if you're listening to this, then you probably already know the truth.
If I had a sister, I'd sell her in a second.
Who created the grav drive using the anomalous gravitational powers of an artifact, which had been discovered by Isa and NASA on Mars, which when powered with helium-3, allows gravity to be manipulated and pulled by the grav drive. And this gravity magic manipulation allowed for long-distance human interstellar travel well beyond the Sol system. And Victor discovered the gravitational powers of the artifact after touching it, where he says that he had a vision, where he met an alternate version of himself, who taught him the equations needed to create the grav drive, but also warned him that it would lead to Earth's destruction. But the other Isa also showed him a vision of humans living on cities on planets all across the galaxy. So Isa decided to ignore his Vision clone's warnings and risked it all for the biscuit and made the grav drive regardless. But in 2149, Isa and his closest peers realized that the grav drive was causing Earth's magnetosphere to deteriorate, and they made a quick fix to the grav drives to try and stop the atmospheric decay, and they even covered up the whole thing to prevent public opinion from turning against grav drive technology. But it was already too late, and the Earth itself turned into a desolate rock only 50 years later. But now we know the dark truth of it all.
And there it is, friends. The ugly truth.
And Isa sacrificed Earth to leap into space, settling thousands of new worlds at the cost of our original home. And it's honestly a solid twist on the surface, but also makes me seriously question the game's overarching lore once I started thinking about it for more than a few seconds. Like, humanity invents the grav drive, and then they soon announce that the Earth's magnetosphere is rapidly decaying, and only 50 years later, the planet is completely dead. And even though they covered it up and even fixed the atmosphere-destroying engine bug on the down low, I'm honestly surprised nobody else put two and two together and realized that this miraculous gravity warping technology might have been the cause of the destruction of Earth's atmosphere. And pretty much nobody in the settled systems beyond woke universe-hopping starborns know that grav drives killed Earth. Nor does it seem like they care very much either. And other settled planets losing their own magnetospheres from grav drive overuse down the line is completely nullified as a threat in a throwaway line on a NASA computer log, which I feel could have been a pretty interesting plot point to explore and would give this twist some more impact. As imagine another inhabited planet starts losing its atmosphere too, like Jemison or Aquila for example, and humanity then has to work together to figure out what's actually happening, which could then potentially expose some uncomfortable truths to the people of the settled systems who'd have to reckon with this knowledge. But nah, the grav drive's atmosphere destroying flaw was hotfixed centuries ago. Don't even worry about it. Also, the destruction of Earth is weirdly unimportant to the people of the settled systems, in a way that makes me feel like everyone in Starfield is suffering from some sort of mass psychosis or memory loss. If you recall, only a fraction of the human population was able to escape, and it's not specifically stated how many people left Earth and how many people were left stranded, but the game implies that more people died on Earth than there were people living out on other planets, and the UC was kind of dog-ass at actually evacuating the majority of humanity off their doomed planet, with billions of people dying alongside Earth. But nobody in the settled system seems to really care about this at all? It's not like the Earth died a millennia ago or something, and tales of the time in galactic history when Earth was still inhabited had fallen into ancient myths and legends or something, as Earth only died around 131 years or so from when Starfield's story starts, and the Earth, and even the Sol system at large, is treated like a historic curiosity, but an ultimately unimportant backwater system for broke bums who have no future or prospects. Even though Earth died less than 200 years ago, the people in the settled systems treat it like it's ancient history, kind of like how us in the modern day would look at the fall of Rome or something. And it's amazing how quickly these guys move on from such immense tragedy. Lots of people alive today still aren't over the fall of the Roman Empire. And plenty of NPCs comment on how the Sol system is essentially the UC boonies that nobody really cares about beyond Deimos star yards on Mars and historical colonies like New Homestead. Also, there's plenty of real-life books in the game, like Oliver Twist, The Count of Monte Cristo, Dracula, A Christmas Carol, and War of the Worlds, but they're just treated like ancient historical curiosities and a way to get some extra cash from the bookshop owner in Aquila City. And people appreciate Earth in a historical sense, but also show zero reverence for it as the cradle of humanity, nor do they seem to care about the billions of poor souls who died when the atmosphere buggered off into space. So people either don't really give a shit about Earth, barely know anything about it and treat it like ancient irrelevant history, or they cynically exploit it, like the Terran Preservation Society, who claim to be all about preserving old Earth artifacts, but it's clear it's just a social club for rich bastards to jerk themselves off for spending large amounts of money on preserved baseballs and basketballs from old Earth. And of course to launder money through donations and awards. And I get the fact that the people who would have escaped Earth and now live in the settled systems are people who care more about new planets and their own lives in space rather than the death of the Earth. But the way that there's no large Earth memorials or cultural events in either the UC or the FC, nor are there any remembrance holidays or commemorations for the billions who died only 130 or so years ago, or how none of the major factions try to invoke the old Earth for their own purposes beyond generic platitudes of, we must unite to explore the stars after Earth has died, we are the UC, we carry humanity's flame, we fight for space real estate, we honor poorly written treaties. Everything surrounding Earth just feels like a huge missed opportunity and just simple lazy world building, as all of Earth's potential conflicts, nations, and peoples are all assimilated into and wiped clean by the UC's creation, and the Freestar Collective are just freedom-loving offshoots of this bland monoculture that like to dress like space cowboys. Or they want to live in a cyberpunk-like world of uncontested corporate power and corruption, free of any real government intervention, and the rest of humanity are all conveniently killed off and forgotten. So don't even bother trying to ask questions like, which nations created and led the UC? How did they choose who got to leave Earth? Were there any international conflicts over the UC's creation? Were some nations allowed to join and others barred? And so on? With humanity transforming from the clusterfuck of earthly politics and competing nations, peoples, and religions into a post-racial English-speaking monoculture in like half a century, which then goes on to wage wars against an alliance of unregulated corporate powers like those on Neon, and settlers who really hate regulations and central government supervision like in Cheyenne. And the way Earth is handled is just really bizarre to me. It's simultaneously critical to the game's story, yet completely irrelevant to the actual NPCs and factions of the settled systems. And it just hurts the overall world and story, due to how sparse the background lore actually is, and how apathetic everyone is to humanity's cradle dying, and untold billions of poor souls dying alongside with it. And the lore about Earth and the UC's creation to avoid extinction feels like reading a history book with 90% of the pages ripped out, leaving only the essential broad strokes to make the story at least coherent, which leaves Starfield's lore feeling incredibly lacking for me. It's a solid concept and twist on the surface, but with very little meaningful depth to it that just raises more questions than answers the more you think about it, which is now kind of a hallmark of modern Bethesdan writing. But anyway, once we leave the NASA facility, we get jumped by some bummy Starborns who get walked down by a guy who has yet to even enter the Unity. Imagine finding all the artifacts and transcending your universe, entering a new one through a magic alien or even potentially divine infinite universe portal, and then you just get clipped by some rando in a mismatched spacesuit. Oof. And we then meet with Samissary and Sith Lord Aquilius here, who are outside waiting for me, where they tell me, look, you gotta side with one of us, and we can team up to kill the other guy and we can enter the Unity together to fulfill our side's ideals. So what's it gonna be? Artifact control via Starborn Council, or artifact anarchy via Starborn Bandits? Will you side with this detached weirdo copy of your dead friend, or side with the guy who killed said friend while trying to rob you for your alien rock collection? Honestly, fuck both of you. I'll get to the Unity myself, which makes the two Starborns team up against me to cockblock me from the Unity, where they then say that they'll meet me at a buried temple for the final epic showdown, Cell game style, where I'm sure they'll spit roast my ass and make me suck their star balls, but at least they'll politely wait for me to gather up the last few artifacts, and let me consolidate my power and let me grind out a few more temples and quests first. One of which is actually a really cool reality swapping quest. We have to navigate 2 versions of the same lab that was experimenting on an artifact, and choose which reality to make canon in your universe. It's a pretty solid concept for a quest and is executed pretty well, although the final choice is a bit too easy. You can either save one guy who is the sole survivor in his version of reality, or save a whole lab of innocent people, but the guy who lived in the other universe is the only one who died in this one, as he had sacrificed himself to save the rest of the lab. Save one guy? Or save hundreds of guys? I think Spock speaks on this. But before I confront the Space Dragonborn duo for an epic final showdown, I decided to check out the Shattered Space DLC, because I finally reached the recommended start level of 35 at around this time in my playthrough, and we can now finally talk about it. The third major faction of the Starfield, House Va'ruun. Now, House Va'ruun in the base game is supposed to be the third major power player in the settled systems, but the reason I haven't even talked about them yet is because outside of a few story mission beats and some side quests where we gotta gun down some straggler zealots, House Va'ruun almost has a non-existent presence in base Starfield. So much so that they almost feel like cut content or something, due to how much they're talked up as a galactic force, yet we see very little of their snake-worshipping asses in normal gameplay. Now, in the game's story, the lore explains the lack of presence by telling us that House Va'ruun has recently retreated from all politics and settled system affairs, and with most Va'ruunians returning to their home planet of Va'ruun-Kai and cutting off contact with the rest of the galaxy, with only a few select agents, and of course the zealots that are left in the settled systems. But let's back up and explain the whole House Va'ruun history, as on the surface, they're the most interesting faction in Starfield, because a mysterious serpent-worshipping space jihadist theocracy is a lot better than whatever the UC and FC got going on. House Va'ruun was founded over 140 years before the game starts by a man named Jinan Va'ruun, who, during a grav jump on board a colony ship on its way to the Kavnik system, claimed to have a reality-transcending experience while the ship was mid-grav jump, where time became distorted and elongated, but only for him, and he made contact with a celestial entity he called the Great Serpent, which spoke to Jinan and told him that he would soon devour the entire universe, and only those who worshipped it would survive its impending cosmic voring of the universe. And Jinan awoke from this experience a changed man, and told his fellow colonists about the experience, and many of them soon converted to his curious cosmic snake cult on their new home planet of Kavnik 1b, later known as Va'ruun-Kai, where they lived in caves before founding the city of Dazra, with Jinan consolidating his power amongst the colonists as a theocratic dictator. And fast forward around 40 years, and House Va'ruun starts making themselves known to the rest of the galaxy, where for 10 years, they established relations with the UC and FC, spreading their new snake religion far and wide, attracting thousands of new followers, or at least they must have attracted thousands of new followers, as Jinan landed on Va'ruun-Kai with less than 400 people, so they need some serious recruitment efforts to muster up any sort of fighting force that could even have a chance of taking on the UC, FC, and independent spacers and settlers. However, this 10-year stretch of seemingly peaceful relations with House Va'ruun was all a cover for Jinan's true plan, as at some point, he got it in his head that humanity must be quote-unquote prepared for the Great Serpent's return, and in order to do that, all humans alive must either be converted or killed, and he kicked off the Serpent's Crusade, turning House Va'ruun into an army of genocidal space jihadists. He's Muad'Dib, but with snakes instead of worms, I guess, who then waged war against all non-believers, United Colonies, Freestar Collective, and broke cosmic farmers and settlers alike. None were spared their serpentine rage, with a crusade lasting a brutal 20 years, the Va'ruun Crusaders destroying the original Den space station and slaughtering thousands of civilians. However, space jihad can only get you so far when you're fighting the entirety of humanity, and the UC and FC were able to incur heavy losses on House Va'ruun and fend them off well enough, with the Zealots resorting to terrorist attacks on undefended settlements and hit-and-run attacks to try and get as many kills as possible, as their military was gradually weakened over time. And eventually, Jinan Va'ruun himself keeled over and died in 2263, and with House Va'ruun's founder and prophet dead without any big cosmic snake return, and the Serpent's Crusade threatening to wipe out House Va'ruun through brutal attrition, Jinan's son Jarek Va'ruun ended the crusade and sued for peace with the galaxy, which formally ended all snake-themed space jihad. However, not all Va'ruun's zealots could accept that the crusade was over, so a faction of fundamentalists led by Jinan's other son Jandar kept fighting and trying to kill everyone alive in the galaxy, and these are the zealots that we can gun down in the base game on a few occasions. But Jarek Va'ruun was way less genocidal than his father, and he enacted a policy of careful isolationism, as they kept their homeworld hidden, but worked to re-establish normal relations with the rest of the galaxy, even establishing the Va'ruun embassy in New Atlantis. And I'm kinda surprised the galaxy even gave these freaks the time of day after House Va'ruun betrayed their trust and launched a 20-year jihad on all living people for not believing in a cosmic snake. But anyway, this policy held until Jarek's son Anasko succeeded him. But as we know, Va'ruun goons had recently fully retreated from life in the settled systems, and we can find this cool-looking star station called the Oracle floating around in space. And when we board it, We find it full of weird-looking ghosts and, space ice goop that seems to teleport you around when touched. And we start running into vortex phantoms, humans who seem to be possessed by this holographic vortex aura, which allows them to teleport across short distances. But all these ghosts have also seemed to have lost their minds too. And we learn that this is a House Va'ruun research station that seemed to be experimenting with grav drive phenomena, as the Oracle was equipped with grav drives that allowed this big-ass star station to jump between systems. But everyone on board succumbed to the vortex aura, and they all went insane. And once we reactivate the station after a solid 0G opening dungeon crawl through this cool-looking Va'ruun star station, it jumps us back to House Va'ruun's home planet of Va'ruunkai, where we exit and speak to the locals. And we see another vortex ghost, but it's the ghost of House Va'ruun's leader, or the speaker for the Serpent, Anasko Va'ruun himself, who seems to be lost in whatever holographic vortex realm of existence that he's currently trapped in. And we hear him calling out to the Great Serpent, but his ghost seems unable to interact with anyone around him. And we also talk to this specimen named Malibor Dukef, who looks like he just crawled out of a German underground dance club or something. I guess bangs and head tattoos are the look of choice for House Va'ruun members. And we learn from Malibor what the hell's going on here. Apparently, Anasko tried some kind of experiment involving a, quote, vortex gate at the Scaled Citadel, which is that cool looking building from the Shattered Space cover art. But whatever he was monkeying around with in there failed catastrophically and caused a massive energy explosion that obliterated most of the city of Dazra, leaving a massive jagged crater in the center of the city, turning everyone who was caught in the explosion into hostile and insane vortex phantoms, and the Citadel is now surrounded by an impenetrable energy field, which looks very cool and striking in the distance, and it's probably the best looking view in the entire game too. We also learn that House Va'ruun's government is composed of 3 smaller noble houses, the Dul Kefs, the Kadiks, and the Vithals, all of whom handle matters of commerce, information and espionage, and upholding the law and devotion to Janan's teachings, respectively. I guess they're kind of like House Lalu, Telvanni, and Radoran, respectively, if they weren't actually interesting. All of whom follow House Va'ruun's supreme mantra, all must serve. So that's just like Valar Dohaeris, right? George R. R. Martin already did this, get better material, Todd! But these sub-Grey houses are completely unable to respond to the disaster at the Citadel without our help, and they've been squabbling amongst themselves in the weak sense of disaster, and they're completely unable to make a move or even collaborate at a base level to get inside the Citadel, as all the houses fear a rival house taking advantage of the situation for their own gain, leaving the remnants of House Va'ruun pathetically paralyzed to do anything at all, until my heroic ass parked their missing space station in orbit. But Malibor thinks our arrival could be Serpent ordained, based on how convenient our timing is, and the fact that we're the only people who can actually hear Anasko Va'ruun for some reason. We're just extra special. Even though we're the first outsider in decades to arrive on Va'ruunkai, Malibor's just like, I sense some great serpent in you. You seem chill. Let's share the trauma pack needle. Now go get your ass converted to our snake religion so we can get down to business. And we then have to go through a cave to perform some religious rites to officially join the Great Serpent religion before we start working with these faithful fellas. And we do some cool rituals such as playing with some cool action figures, jumping across a gap, meditating in a pool of noxious shit water, and walking through the original Va'ruun cave settlements, even checking out Jinan's old home and portrait. I guess we know where the Va'ruun bangs come from. And it's honestly a pretty nice little pad as far as makeshift cave homes go, but there's no new interesting lore tidbits to be found here, unfortunately. But once that's done and we're officially a House Va'ruun diviner, we can then help out the houses with their problems, so we can build a cool laser to disable the energy field and get us into the Citadel. We help the Kadiks rescue one of their scientists from nearby zealots, who the Kadiks were actually making secret deals with on the side with for some time. But I decided to end these zealots for good, cause fuck them, that's why. And we then help House Dul Kef, where its leader, a guy whose name I honestly forgot, tells us to head to the nearby dam facility to learn more about what Anasko was experimenting with, as he too went to the dam before the Citadel disaster and seemed to have found something there, as well as to get a replacement part for the Citadel. And at the dam, which I guess dams a small lake that flows into an even smaller lake? The geography ain't mathin' here, unless it rains a fucking lot on Va'ruunkai, I suppose. But we find that it's inhabited by more vortex ghosts. But these ghosts are still sane somehow, and they defend the dam on the orders of Janan Va'ruun himself, where we learn that the dam contains a MacGuffin technology called the Vortex Interlock, which was the result of gravitational experiments that Janan conducted to try and re-establish contact with a Great Serpent, with this holographic vortex energy itself being described as the energy between universes. So I guess it's kind of like the warp from Warhammer 40k. Janan somehow entered the Starfield warp and met a giant snake entity. Now he wants to try and directly harness that warp power by experimenting with gravity and grav drives to access the world between worlds, We also learn that these sane ghosts are actually still living people held in life support pods, their whole bodies covered with vortex energy that allows them to become effectively unkillable teleporting super soldiers. And the only way to truly defeat them is to destroy or shut down the pod that their physical body is in. And lastly, we help the Vethals with a problem, as their son had run off and was declared a heretic by his own father, who now demands that we kill him, much to the disdain of the other two jabronis here. And after a wild goose chase all around Varunkai looking for their son, we find that he had been injured while escaping, but was cared for by these two farmer ladies after he showed up at their doorstep, and they set him up at an alien groat farm nearby, where he was hiding as a quiet farmer ever since he fled. So I confront him, where he says that he ran away from home because his family are a bunch of religious whack jobs. He's not even a true serpent believer like that. He doesn't wish to take his father's place at the head of the Ministry of State, and he was broken by the loss of his sister, who died in Anasko's big oopsie-daisy Citadel disaster. And he just wants to leave all this Varun bullshit behind. So I tell him to give me his sister's special ring, and I'll pass him off as dead to his angry pops. And he finally gives me an access code to access the power grid, which is the last thing we need to fire up the doohickey laser beam and access the Citadel, which of course I'll be going in alone too. And the Citadel is a large and super well detailed dungeon, with tons of enemies to blast in the face, and a few lore tidbits to find. And I appreciated the Varun Museum inside that shows parts of destroyed robots and space stations that the Zealots destroyed in the Serpent's Crusade. And we also use our stolen Vortex Interlock to stabilize the Citadel, and we can finally speak to Anasko's Vortex Ghost, who then reveals a massive room of Vortex Ghost pods, and then he reveals what exactly happened here at the Citadel. They learned about Jinan's old Vortex Ghost in the dam, and tried a much larger version of it here in the Citadel, which led to a few complications. But now that we've restabilized the place, he reveals to us his master plan. Anasko can now activate his teleporting ghost soldiers and restart the Serpent's Crusade anew, but now with unkillable teleporting vortex soldiers, who can then teleport all across the galaxy from their pods on Varunkai. And we then have to make a choice to either activate the new Vortex Zealots or destroy the facility. Stop this magic ghostly vortex madman, or kill 7 billion people. It's a pretty tough choice. Well, I decide that mass genocide and space jihad is probably bad, so I shut down the pods and kill all the zealots in waiting. But Anasko is like, whatever. Once I kill you, I'll just make more ghostly goons. And then the zealots break into the Citadel, and the whole place is now a huge clusterfuck. I'm killing vortex ghosts and zealots now. It's just a complete Varun massacre. It's still pretty fun. But once we reach the Citadel's pinnacle, this starts the final boss with Anasko, which is an endless fight against a horde of vortex ghosts as we expose and destroy energy nodes on this large room-sized vortex gate contraption. And the game runs like complete butt in this fight. The frames are chugging like Badlands. But once we destroy the gate and fend off all the killer ghosts, Anasko's ghost can barely step to me too. We then gotta escape through the Citadel in a pretty cool sequence where I fall through the floor. And we escape the Citadel just as the damaged vortex gate sucks it out of existence. And we then wake up surrounded by the 3 Grey House counselors, where we relay to them that Anasko and the Citadel are gone, and now these 3 jabronis need to figure out what the future of House Varun is, without a Varun to guide them, which they can't do either. So of course, they defer to me to choose, or we can then choose which house will take control. And I chose the dual Kefs to lead, because they were the least annoying to deal with during their respective quest. Plus, Malibor here has been a solid advocate for us, and his voice acting is pretty solid too.
An amusing thought, but no. Try again.
And we then tell him that Anasko wished to restart the Crusade. And the Vethals are totally on board with a new Crusade, no questions asked, even though their holy city was just decimated by a vortex nuke, and the Varuns are probably at their weakest point since their founding. So Malibor is like, let's pump the brakes on this holy war shit real quick, and try to fix the mess that we got going on at home here. And the Kadiks abstain, but honestly, who gives a fuck about them? So now it's up to us. Will we restart the Crusade? Or not? Or say,
fuck all of y'all. All of y'all can go suck a caterpillar dick.
And tell the Varunians to give up and accept that it's over for them. But I want all the rewards I can get. So I say, don't restart the Crusade, as that would probably be dumb. And they're like, sweet, bet, sounds like a plan. And they allow me to own a house in Dazra, and they all just mill away. And that's pretty much it for Shattered Space. The story just kinda grinds to a stop there. And that's the best possible ending you could get, I believe. And if you're out for some genocidal snake jihad, if you decide to activate the pods and join Anasko at the gate, your character gets eaten by a vortex bomb and dies. So you can't even follow through with your evil Ghost Crusade back in the settled systems if you go that route. And if you recommend to the Varunian houses to restart the Crusade, nothing new actually happens. And if you tell them to kick rocks, you just get kicked out of Dazra, and Andreja is pissed at you. Actually, Andreja is comically lacking in an interesting story here, because a lot of her companion quest is about her being worried about not being able to return home to Varunkai. So for her to only have like one conversation about finally being back home, and then being like, Anyways, let's blow this pop stand. And not really saying anything else beyond some surface level dialogue interjections, it's just a simple missed opportunity by the devs. All of which makes Shattered Space feel pretty hollow in terms of story and impact. Like, there could be an interesting angle to restart the Crusade, as House Va'ruun is crippled, leaderless, and pretty much half destroyed. And they don't even have the teleporting Force Ghosts anymore either. And launching an ill-advised crusade against the UC and FC could potentially end with the complete annihilation of their faction. If, say, the United Colonies or Freestar Collective found the location of Va'ruun Kai, or hell, imagine the two bitter rivals actually teamed up to finally destroy the Snake Jihadists for good. Or if you choose to tell them to not crusade and rebuild, I wish there was a bit more dialogue or interactions to try and dissuade them from ever trying to crusade again, as the first crusade destroyed their reputation, killed thousands of them, and they almost annihilated their entire capital city trying to create vortex-saturated super soldiers for yet another crusade. Maybe they'd have to reckon with their violent past and try to move forward towards a brighter future with a little less killing. Like, if the Serpent truly wanted them to crusade again, why would such a disaster in pursuit of that even occur? Seems like the big snake upstairs doesn't approve of their plans or something. But who knows? I only converted like yesterday. Also, I didn't really care about the sub-houses or their politics or squabbles. It's all very surface-level stuff, writing and lore-wise, and you don't spend enough time with each house to really get to understand and ingratiate yourself with them in any meaningful ways. And the game spreads itself too thin, trying to have 3 distinct factions in like a 5-hour story DLC. And I also don't really like the Va'ruun look. It's kind of annoying to look at. I don't know what's up with the big eye makeup and obscene amounts of mullets and haircuts with bangs. Although, I will say their architecture is pretty good looking with its polygonal walls and snake motifs, and House Va'ruun has surprisingly good interior design for a murderous cult of snake fanatics. And the actual quests in this DLC are pretty solid as far as Starfield content goes. Most, if not all, the quests here have multiple steps, plenty of persuasion opportunities and decent chunks of dialogue, fairly large and complex dungeons to explore and comb for loot in that are filled with tons of enemies to blast to keep the good times rolling. And there's a solid helping of side quests all over Va'ruun Kai. Like this quest to recover some lost relics from some dastardly spacers who set up shop in an old military factory like the cosmic roaches they are. But how the hell did these spacers find Va'ruun Kai? The UC and FC can't even find the place, but these bums found it? Interesting. Or we can do this quest to pilgrimage to all these cool looking monuments on the planet. And Va'ruun Kai is probably the densest and most well designed planet in all of Starfield. It's got some great looking colors and landscapes, and everything is cast in purple and red glows, and colorful aurora borealis shimmer in the reddish purple sky. And it does indeed feel pretty alien and mystical, which does a lot for the atmosphere and the aura of the DLC. And honestly, with base Starfield being so spread out and procedurally generated, it was honestly kind of refreshing to go back to a classic Bethesdan small but dense DLC map of handcrafted locations, geography, and quests to do. As besides the first quest on the Oracle, the DLC never leaves Va'ruun Kai, which allows Shattered Space to have a tighter focus at the cost of it feeling completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. And I don't think any choices you make in this DLC affect the wider base game universe whatsoever, which is disappointing no matter how you look at it. And also, this whole time, I've been playing Starfield on Xbox PC Game Pass, which is honestly a really solid deal in my opinion. It's probably the overall cheapest way to play all of Starfield's main content, as it's like $17 a month or whatever for quote-unquote free access to Starfield and all of its paid DLCs. As otherwise, if you want to play it on say Steam or on console, you have to buy Starfield for $50, plus $20 for Shattered Space, which was priced at $30 at launch, which is just hilarious. Shattered Space simply isn't worth $20, let alone $30. And I finished the Shattered Space main quest in around 5 or so hours, maybe 6 at the most. And I found the bulk of the story, especially anything to do with the other houses, incredibly uninteresting in concept and in dialogue. If you put a gun to my head and tell me to name 2 people from House Kadik, tell my family I love them. As these House Va'ruun folk are just kind of hard to like for me. And the whole main conflict of the DLC are the Grey Houses being like, "Oh, Outlander, please help us. We're too weak." And squabbling. "We couldn't get anything done for weeks. We can't do jack shit. Please do everything for us." Even though I thought their actual quests were pretty solid and sometimes pretty great as far as Starfield quests go. But outside of the plan to restart the Crusade with teleporting ghosts and whatever the hell is going on with the Vortex warp energy, we don't get any other real interesting plot points or extra lore about Jinan and his religion outside of stuff we didn't already more or less know about them. The best I got was a few slates from Jinan himself, where we hear him right after his snake encounter, where he goes from a kindly and soft-spoken man to giving his first sermon, to him angrily declaring a fatwa on all non-serpent believing peoples, because the infidel UC and FC were being really mean to him about a serpent religion.
Too long have we preached his understanding and received nothing but derision in return. Is that our fate? To suffer the insults and disdain of unbelievers?
Which does a solid job at showing his descent from a confused but well-intentioned man to a violent religious zealot. but that's more or less it. And the lack of impact this DLC has on the rest of the game makes this whole story feel somewhat pointless, as outside of Varunkai, none of the shit we do here seems to matter at all. You can't even evil max and start the Ghost Crusade and wreak havoc on the settled systems, so I can see why people who shelled out 30 smackaroos for this thing on release weren't too happy about it. But as a part of PC Game Pass, it's actually a pretty solid questline that gets us real close to the enigmatic House Varun's cool looking planet, has a collection of mostly fun and solid quests with large dungeons to explore, and plenty of shoot to do. And I actually really liked how chaotic and bombastic the final Citadel dungeon was too. The Scaled Citadel is probably one of the most memorable dungeons in all of Starfield for me. And I actually quite enjoyed how much shit was crammed into one planet for this DLC, and it makes me wish important planets like Jemison and Aquila had the same amount of handcrafted content around their cities too, instead of them being larger than average settlements in a bog standard area with some randomly generated locations nearby. But regardless, it's a pretty solid diversion and questline in Starfield, even if the story fails to impress, and the fact that I didn't have to pay $20 for it made it all the better. But anyway, with Shattered Space done and the Snake Boys handled, we can finally take on the Starborns and finally gather up the remaining artifacts. So I jump to our chosen battleground planet, which starts a space battle between me, the Hunter, the Emissary, and some random bloke they had tag along to help gank me. And this is probably the hardest space battle in the entire game, as it's a 3v1 versus those fast and powerful Starborn buttplug ships. And as soon as the battle starts, they all just start pissing on you with their lasers for some huge damage. So you'll need a pretty powerful ship to get past this fight, as Starship combat is mostly a numbers game, with pretty straightforward ship combat where the ship with the bigger guns and shields is usually the one that wins. You can't really defeat a stronger ship by doing evasive maneuvers or doing barrel rolls to outpilot your opponent. It's simple and mostly slow, clunky chase and shoot dogfighting, but you can make this fight easier by siding with one of the Starborns, so it's at least a 2v2. But I don't like any of these frickers, and I want that unity all for myself. So to beat them, I had to grind up my starship piloting to level 4, so I could then fly Class C ships, the best type of ship that you can buy, and I had to upgrade my weapon engineering skills, so I was able to buy stronger lasers and guns for my ship, as the basic tier weapons absolutely weren't cutting it. And then I bought a pretty sweet looking Varun Prophecy ship on Varunkai for like 300,000 credits, but that fairly girthy price tag was a non-issue for me, because I had over 600,000 credits stuffed in my butt crack, as main and faction quests just shower you in credits as easy rewards. Plus credits are extremely common loot to find, so I had no shortage of them. So I bought the ship, and also bought some upgraded weapons, and even then, I was barely able to pull this fight out. But I did like how this was sort of a final check to make sure your captain and shipbuilding skills are all up to snuff, and it actually forces the player to get crafty and to build, buy, or modify the most powerful ship they can to succeed, which is a great incentivizer to engage with the surprisingly robust and complex shipbuilding system in this game. Although for me personally, I find the shipbuilding to be too cluttered, confusing, and obtuse for its own good. Ship part lists are really long and disorganized, with tons of extremely similar looking parts and names, and ship classes and parts are all locked behind different skills that you have to grind out first. So you gotta do a lot of grunt work and skill grinding before you can access the meatier parts of shipbuilding. But I was still very satisfied to finally take out these guys with my Varunian Black Dot Charger. But now we can land and enter a large ecliptic facility full of slaughtered goons. It looks like the Starborns are getting busy. And I start fighting off some Starborn thugs who are here to try and cockblock me from our date with the Unity. But they all fall before me. Not even a clone army can stop me. And we soon discover a massive buried temple in a silvery cave, with tons of cool looking gravitational anomalies floating around it. And we enter the temple, and the Emissary and the Hunter appear before me, sticks out, ready to end my entire shit. But before we fight, I try to persuade them one last time to stand down and let me access the Unity without violence. And I'm like, why can't we be friends? Just let me get Unitied up without any bloodshed, cause, you know, it's nice to be nice. And of course, it actually worked. Yeah, the Hunter goes from groaning in my face to deciding that he's feeling older than usual and actually doesn't have the appetite for violence right now. And the Emissary concurs, and they're just kind of like, aw, ain't you the cutest little guy? Take the artifacts and get out of here, you little rascal, you little goofball. And they fork over their artifacts and then blip out of existence, never to be seen again. Which I just have to laugh at. I just leg it Linnaeus to the final boss without even putting a single skill point into persuasion. The Hunter here just got verbally shellacked by a guy with the communication skills of a creepy Undertaker. It's a great encapsulation of Bethesda's modern RPG design philosophy. There's no need to actually commit to persuasion skills and specified character builds, when you can just get lucky via silly little minigame skill checks. But now that I've air quotes defeated the final bosses and got the last artifacts, we can now enter the Unity, which we do by loading all the artifacts into the ship's armillary console and then grav jumping anywhere, where we'll then be transported to this beautiful cosmic area with galaxies and stars spreading out all around me, with a big starry orb at the center. It's kind of like walking through the universe as a galaxy-sized human. It's pretty cool. But there's also a person standing between me and the cosmic orb, and when we get closer, the man turns around and reveals that it's me, Luke. And my clone speaks to me, and he's incredibly obtuse about what he actually is and what he's doing here. But we're finally at the Unity itself, the center of the infinite universe in all its dimensions. And I ask him who made the temples and the artifacts, and he's like, the creators made it naturally. Creators create things, obviously. Maybe one day you'll meet them, but not today. Tee. And in fact, all of this universe was created just so my character could stand before the Unity one day. And I could just feel Emil and Todd jerking my nuts with this dialogue, man. Creators create things. Get the fuck out of town. You ain't slick, Todd. But now we can also choose to either enter the Unity and start anew in a new universe, or turn around and go back to my current universe, and maybe linger there a bit longer. And my Unity clone also shows me the impact of my choices during the story and faction quest lines, to show me how this universe will play out into the future after I'm gone. It's kind of like a walkable version of the Fallout ending slides. So that's pretty neat, I guess. But if you do decide to enter the Unity, we see a zoom out of the whole universe, I believe. There's some massive universe clouds and storms too, and I'm not really sure what that's about. But then you start Starfield's New Game Plus mode and become a bona fide Starborn, waking up on your own sweet Starborn ship, wearing a sweet Starborn spacesuit, where you get to keep all your levels and perks, and get to recreate your character and pick up new traits if you so choose. But you don't keep any of your items or your ships from the previous universe, unless you build this new quantum entanglement device in the Lodge, which will allow you to store your items and pick them up in New Game Plus, which is quite nice to have. New Game Plus also allows you to have some cheeky Starborn interactions, where your character just knows everything that's going to happen before they actually happen. And we can use this knowledge to just skip the entire main quest and just go after the artifacts directly, checklist style, just to speed things up. But you can also replay the whole main quest if you so desire, if you really don't value your time, I suppose. And there's also a laundry list of slight changes that can appear in each new universe, like Koriko being a grown-up Starborn, all the Constellation members being children, the Sarah Morgan plant, you can save your friends from dying with your universe-hopping knowledge, and several others that add some fun fluff to Constellation and the main quest. But besides these alternate universe changes, the main point of New Game Plus is to increase your powers, loop after loop, in order to become a semi-divine space-powered killing machine. And then you just do universe runs until you get bored and move on to a different game or something. Or if you max out all your powers to rank 10 after 10 Unity runs for all 24 abilities. So that's like what? 240 rounds of temple floating minigames? Does that sound fun to you? Sounds more like a damn day job to me. And I respect Starborning as a new feature for Bethesda's games, as New Game Plus just wasn't really a thing in any previous Bethesda game. You either just kept playing and grinding out Radiant quests infinitely, like in Skyrim you could infinitely level by resetting your skills and making them legendary, or take Fallout 4 with its infinite Preston Garvey Radiant settlement quests. And if you wanted to start over, you just had to start a new game and make a new character. But now, we can do multiple playthroughs with the same character, and the game is built around this new Game Plus feature, as the whole main quest is essentially a tour of the settled system's biggest POIs, as well as a tutorial and ramp up for the New Game Plus mode. But besides getting some sweet Starborn swag, some wacky new encounters and universe changes, and unlocking new tiers of space powers and maxing out your character's levels, a lot of the New Game Plus is, again, a missed opportunity, especially when it comes to consequences and choices, as Starfield still follows Bethesda's completely open design philosophy when it comes to the factions, which has been in place since Oblivion. You remember all those jokes about being the simultaneous Archmage, Harbinger, Nightingale, Thief Master, Dragonborn, Vampire Lord in Skyrim? It's the same thing here, as you can join all the factions without any consequences or roadblocks between them. Like, I just got done helping the UC solve their Terramorph problem. I'm a well-respected UC Vanguard captain who did the entire UC Vanguard questline, and I was even inducted as a Class 1 citizen by the UC government personally, all of whom see me as a hero of the United Colonies. But even though I'm like the UC LeBron James, I can also just waltz up to Aquila City and get a job as a rookie Freestar Ranger doing grunt work. There's no background check required, and no one comments on the potential divided loyalties or even calls me a UC lapdog or something. The Rangers couldn't care less about what I've been getting up to with their dreaded OPPs, the UC. Like, I could potentially be a spy or a double agent or something, but they simply don't care at all about my past. And the whole Freestar Ranger quest involves untangling a conspiracy surrounding the 1st Cavalry, a former FC Colony War Battalion turned insurgent militia, who became disillusioned with the Freestar Collective at the end of the Colony War, as they claimed that FC governors forced them to surrender when they were on the cusp of taking Nira and even winning the whole Colony War, according to them. So they decided to rebel against their former faction for this cowardice and perceived betrayal of their sacrifices in the name of the Freestar Collective. And well, a few quests later, we learned that the 1st Cavalry here were secretly hired by Starship Manufacturing CEO and member of the FC Governing Council, a man named Ron Hope, who was voiced by the legendary Wes Johnson. I'd recognize that voice anywhere.
I never intended for anyone to be hurt. I told Hull to buy the land, not take it by force.
who was secretly hiring them to drive settlers off their farms by force, so he could then use their farms as testing grounds for a new fertilizer that he developed, which greatly increases soil mineral levels, which was drumming up huge profits and stock prices for Hope's stagnating company. Now imagine I took all this knowledge that one of the FC Board of Governors members was secretly hiring former FC soldiers turned military insurgents to evict and terrorize his own people just so he could pump his stock prices. It could be some juicy propaganda for the UC to use against the FC, to expose them as a cartel of corrupt businessmen who terrorize their own people for their own profit, unable to control rebels and terrorists within their own systems too. And this could go vice versa, as in the UC Vanguard questline. You discover that the UC violated the armistice in an extremely brazen way by faking the execution of Admiral Francois Sanan, keeping him alive in the basement of the mass facility to serve as a military advisor and hunter of other UC war criminals. And now imagine if news got out that the widely hated war criminal Ve Victus was still alive, and the UC had broken the armistice since its very inception, and the fact that he even manufactured terramorph attacks on his own UC settlements, just so his clone daughter Hadrian could get some glory in eventually stopping them. If this little secret came to light, it could easily escalate back to open war if the FC ever caught wind of this massive lie. But that's not even an option, or even a consideration. Even Sam Coe, the most FC-aligned companion in the entire game, isn't even super bothered that this war criminal is still alive. He's kinda just like, "You UC bastards kept that fucker alive? Heh, how incredibly typical of you, UC bastards." But this also goes nowhere, and it all just makes the factions feel like isolated islands of content, rather than actual living factions that interlock into the game's world and actually have an impact on it, like say in Fallout New Vegas. And this also extends to the Crimson Fleet, as if you decide to go against the UC CIA and betray them to become a murderous thieving pirate, you don't get hit with any bounty in UC-held systems for killing one of their commanders and betraying SysDef, and the Crimson Fleet pirates all become non-hostile to you, since you're now a member of their faction, which will now make any locations that have Crimson Fleet pirates occupying it completely devoid of any gameplay, as they don't attack you, and they'll let you attack them in return without any consequences. I was exploring this nice villa area that I randomly found on a planet, and I was killing the Crimson Fleet goons inside, wondering why they weren't attacking me when I shot them, and then I remembered that they're actually my faction mates, which makes any Crimson Fleet held location just a non-issue. And joining the fleet actively removes gameplay from Starfield. But now you think that having a New Game Plus system that's central to the game's story would be a great opportunity to make choices actually matter again. Like joining the UC Vanguard should absolutely lock you out of joining the Freestar Rangers, and vice versa, and committing to joining a fleet of space pirates should make you a wanted criminal in UC space, especially after betraying UC SysDef and shooting one of their commanders in the fucking head, which could have forced you to avoid UC space entirely as a consequence of your choice to join an evil pirate faction. And maybe you'd have to sneak into places like New Atlantis to complete quest steps, where you'd run the risk of being recognized and attacked, like if the guards came up to you and said,
"Wait, I know you."
Like sure, you lose access to convenient UC locations and vendors, but you'd in turn gain access to Crimson Fleet services, such as the ability to sell contraband for fat stacks of credits, and it would turn those Crimson Fleet held locations into safe havens for you, instead of what it does in the base game, which is just removing content if you're friends with the pirates. And if you wanted to do an opposing faction's questline or take different sides, you'd have to wait for New Game Plus to reset yourself and do a brand new run with the factions you went against in your first universe. But nah, Starfield just plays it as safe as possible and lets you do whatever you desire faction-wise without any major consequences or gameplay changes. But now in New Game Plus, you can just replay the same questlines again, but maybe make different choices to see what will happen, or maybe see if you'll get some different rewards this time. But the lack of consequences remains the same, and it's just the same grind for artifacts and space powers that takes center focus of the New Game Plus. Also, the infinite universes available to us also ends up looping back around and making this consequentless universe seem even more consequentless, as it's kind of hard to care about the current universe you're in once you know about the Starborns and what the Unity actually is. It's hard to care about any universe at all for that matter, when you can just do a scavenger hunt to wipe it all clean and do it all over again. You can place some roots down in this game, like building settlements, buying a fleet of cool ships, and even getting married. But the crux of the game's story is to leave it all behind and start anew. You can marry Andreja in one universe and give Barrett shots in the next. It doesn't matter. It's all transient and due to be reset anyway, and nobody else in this game has agency besides me. And the game sort of inadvertently turns you into the hunter, just from basic incentives, an uncaring agent of chaos who only wishes to empower himself, and the rest is fluff that can be reset or undone pretty easily, which could be clever in a sort of meta-contextual way a la Far Cry 3, where your character becomes a monster and killer in-game, but you were just having dumb fun in real life. But that would require actual incentives or meaningful story themes to remain and reject the Unity beyond. Ain't the Constellation folks your friends who you care very deeply about? To which I say, not really. I mean, I married Andreja to see what would happen, and to get that sweet achievement. And my aloof but headstrong Varunian Latina wife is quite precious to me. But when I told her I'm about to jump through a magic universe portal, where I'll be obliterated in this universe and you'll likely never see me again, and the bond that we share will be lost forever, she's just like, alright, I trust you I suppose. Goodbye, husband. Unity does sound fun, so I can't blame you. It just makes you feel totally detached and uninterested in any given universe, since we can just start clean again and undo all our work. There's no time to give a shit or truly immerse yourself in the game's universe. There's space shao grinds to be done, man. But main quests and new game pluses aside, let's talk about the latest free lane updates and the Terran Armada DLC, as this is Starfield's newest and likely final major update. The free lanes update is mostly focused on space travel and POIs, as it introduces a new cruise mode when flying your ship around in a solar system. You can shift into said cruise mode and fly to each planet in the system manually now, where you can encounter new POIs and events like hostile ship attacks, derelict ships, star stations, loose cargo and junk, ships that need assistance, and plenty more random space encounters. Like I once met this crazy dude who claims that he saw eyes everywhere in the sky around him, and the dude was geeking out.
I have to rip them right out of my skull. Kill them before they kill me. And I won't let them kill me. I won't.
Or the ship that I found that was full of dead miners and scientists. And through some slates on the ship that I found, I learned that they all died from a microbe infection in their brains that they got from infested water on a planet they were mining tungsten on. And it's a cool and creepy little encounter that helps give us some nice world building and reminds us of the cruelty of space. And Free Lanes' new cruise mode is absolutely a boon to Starfield's gameplay loop. It's pretty cool to fly by planets at extreme speeds and to freely explore any solar system you're in for new and interesting POIs and encounters, instead of having to use the cluttered layered menus to teleport around star systems to travel, which was always really cumbersome to navigate, and it was really unconvincing that we're actually doing any real space travel here. Space traveling feels much more believable now, and even offers some incentives to go out and explore the cosmos, which is a plus for Starfield no matter how you look at it. But it's also such an indictment on the creation engine itself, as it took Todd and the boys 2 years post-launch to add manual space travel between planets in their space exploration game? Because this is a feature that should have been present at launch, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. And also, despite the cruise mode being mostly empty aside from planets and random POIs, it also runs weirdly bad for me. It slows down to like 40 or 50 FPS when boosting around the empty vacuum of space, which is broken up by the occasional sphere and POI pop-in, which just seems really odd to me. And it really shows me how strung out and antiquated this engine really is when I'm dropping double-digit frames flying around a mostly empty area of space. Just makes no sense to me. And also, like I mentioned, Free Lanes also adds plenty of new POI locations on planets for more variety and places to shoot up, so you're less likely to see the same copy and pasted abandoned robot factories and cryolabs across multiple different planets, although I haven't seen all the new locations yet. It definitely feels much more varied than in the past, just based on the exploring that I've done so far in this new update. I found these new shipping centers, greenhouses, a cave lab, workers loitering around this large pipe and bridge looking structure. I'm not really sure what this is, but it looks kind of cool regardless. I found a creepy abandoned safe house that had odd messages in it and a loud metallic thudding noise coming from a machine inside of it. That was pretty eerie. I found a cool looking old hangar that was appropriated by some Crimson Fleet pirates, and some space convenience stores that I could shoot and loot through. And having a wider variety of locations and structures to visit on planets is something Starfield desperately needed, as earlier versions of Starfield quickly ran out of POIs, and you'd start seeing the same copy and pasted facilities in completely different solar systems that are light years apart from each other. Plus we also got previous updates that added land vehicles that you could buy from the Starship Service guys, and they really help make planet travel feel way less boring and tedious, although the car is very simplistic and light feeling, with its super jump and jet engines that you can fly around in it with. It ain't no GTA driving, but it handles well enough for what it needs to do, and cutting out the boring long distance runs across barren planets to POIs is a very welcome addition. It also adds a bunch of smaller side quests at the new Anchor Point station, like this creepy guy called the Arbitrator, who sends you out on some morally dubious bounties, or helping the guard captain deal with some spacers. And this station serves as a nexus point to feed you directly into new Free Lanes POIs and quests. However, the Free Lanes update is far from perfect. The cruise mode is a bit slower and more tedious than I had hoped for, as sometimes it'll take several minutes of going in a straight line to reach a new planet, and the game will even let you autopilot to distant planets, so you can mill around your ship in the meantime and try not to die of boredom. And boosting while cruising is unresponsive and clunky, and your ship takes an eternity to get up to maximum speeds, which makes cruising honestly kinda boring. And it makes me just want to fast travel most of the time, when I'm not just looking out for POIs. But you still can't fly directly to planets and then just seamlessly land on on them from space. All planets now have invisible walls that prevent you from hitting them. You can kind of just run into them like you're driving into a wall, which isn't unexpected. Starfield's engine simply isn't built for No Man's Sky-esque planet travel and mostly seamless transitions from space to planet flying. If you tried flying your ship within the atmosphere of a planet, I'm pretty sure the creation engine would self-immolate at the idea of even trying to render that. And free lanes is definitely a boon to the game's exploration and overall content, but it isn't a true Starfield 2.0 update that many Starfield haters might have been wishing for. It's just more of the same, just with more varied locales and a new way to get around star systems, which itself is a vehicle to encounter new space-based POIs. And if you really didn't enjoy Starfield, more POIs, side quests, and a new form of limited space travel won't exactly win you back, as the game is simply too, well, outdated and engine restricted to ever be on the same level of No Man's Sky's ship flying and exploration. But if you enjoyed Starfield as it was, and loved the loop of land, explore, maybe quest, shoot, loot, and repeat, Free Lanes is probably the best update you could ask for. It adds a whole new dimension of space travel that gives you a much truer feeling of exploration, even if it's not super exciting gameplay-wise, along with tons of new POIs on both land and in space to check out and shoot through, if you just really enjoy the setting. It's just more varied and slightly more open Starfield. So if you like Starfield, you'll very much like the Free Lanes. It simply has more things to see and do in the settled systems. But if not, these updates will do pretty much nothing for you. Also in the time since Starfield launched, Bethesda also dropped the Trackers Alliance questline, which will finally allow you to join the Trackers, or the Space Bounty Hunters Guild in layman's terms. They track wanted people for money. Get it? And they have a unique 100% original slogan: leave no quarter, show no mercy.
Leave no quarter, show no mercy.
And we can go after some high-stakes story mission bounties, along with Radiant Quest bounties that you can do pretty much infinitely, which are whatever. You go to a POI on a random planet, kill a guy, and return. Riveting. However, this wasn't a free update or a DLC, but rather is an official Bethesda-made Creation Club paid mod, listing for 700 Creation Club credits. But it seems that Game Pass also spotted me 1,000 free KK credits to buy this thing if I wanted to. So it's just another reason to play Starfield on PC Game Pass. Because imagine paying for Starfield for $50, Shattered Space for $20, Terran Armada for $10, and the Trackers Alliance for $7, all sold separately. Todd's greed is fucking shameless. But the Trackers Alliance just adds more solid content to the game. The one story tracker quest I did was actually pretty interesting. You fight through a zero-G ship scrapyard that's run by spacers, and it actually had a fun little twist at the end of it. I got bamboozled by one of the classier shipjackers I've ever met.
You've probably found my associate Deke, and focus, damn it, is not in fact me. But don't worry, I won't leave you stranded. I'm not that bad a guy. With a key to an old junker that should hold up long enough to get you home.
And you also get access to the Trackers Alliance cool clubhouse, and you meet their anonymous leader, Number One, or No One. Get it? We can now find these silver bars called Astras in these endgame loot chests, which you can exchange with this tracker mechanic in their clubhouse basement for some randomly generated rare loot, being able to trade up to 3 Astras for a yellow legendary tiered random item. And it's a nice little plus to the looting system of Starfield, as you can now go to the Astra Casino for some new rare items. But what you get is completely random, so if you want a certain type of item, you'll have to save scum until you get a semi-decent item, instead of like a jetpack with worse stats than your currently equipped one. And it's a pretty nice addition for Game Pass players, as it's just more solid content. But I'm not sure if it's worth the deal with the devil of actually having to pay for Bethesda-made mods. I still refuse to pay for any Creation Club mods. I'm sorry, Todd. But next, let's talk about the latest paid DLC, the Terran Armada, which expands on the Free Lanes. It's a $10 DLC expansion that's also free with Game Pass. Man, thanks Bill Gates, you smarmy pedophile. You gave me a great deal on Starfield. Hats off, man. And to start Terran Armada, you gotta listen to the Settled System News Network Obelisk here, which will tell us about an attack a new and mysterious army called the Terran Armada pulled on a luxury space liner. And we then have to swoop in and investigate the ship, and find it via cruise mode. And this ship might have the most detailed interior in all of Starfield. It looks pretty great and ornate, but we find everyone inside shot dead by killer robots, the Terran Armada having a CIS-style droid army as their main fighting force. And we help boot up a friendly robo-soldier named Delta, who is a new companion for this quest line. He's okay. The other friendly robot, Bucky, is way cooler, and I actually really liked his dialogue and his performance.
Wouldn't want you to end up looking like me.
Plus, his side quest has a great little moment where we get ambushed by a massive squad of Terrans. And he also roasts me for being a UC Vanguard captain and a Freestar Ranger. He's like, damn bro, I guess I didn't do a background check on you, huh?
Is this some kind of sick joke, or are you a walking national security hazard? They really didn't run a background check on you, huh?
And I'm like, is Bethesda roasting their own bad writing right now? This is surreal. This may be the best NPC in all of Starfield. And this mission also introduces us to the main gameplay feature of the DLC, being these Terran Armada incursions, where the Terran Armada will take over a random system, which will be denoted by their icon next to a star. And to defeat them, you need to travel to the system, cruise on over to the area that the Armada is in, and either land on the planet's surface to destroy a massive mining ship, or board and destroy a robot manufacturing ship after a short dogfight. And repeat. And it complements the Free Lanes update by forcing you to use cruise mode to find and defeat the Terran incursions, and it's again a solid concept. And the Terran Armada actually has interesting goals that I was hoping to see more of, that being, hey, actually remember Earth? As the Terrans claim to be the true children of Earth, and they seek to destroy the UC and the FC with their robot army to bring an end to the endless fighting between the perpetually squabbling factions and to unite humanity once again. And only we can stop them by teaming up with a secretive galactic defense club that has a UC officer guy, a Freestar Ranger lady, and this dude. I'm not really sure what his deal is. I guess he's our Ryujin employee or something, who are all able to put aside their factional differences to take on the Terrans. But we do all the real work, of course, and it feels weirdly out of place. As you can tell, they just made up this Void crew for the DLC. And also, the lore ended up being pretty disappointing, as these Terrans don't really have any real connection to the Earth, and they're actually a combined army of two rogue UC and FC fleets who teamed up during the Colony War, and they want to invoke Earth to take over the galaxy for themselves. As although they rightfully call out the UC and FC for fighting seemingly pointless wars and refusing to unite to progress humanity, the Terrans are just as bad. They just massacre anyone in their way and anyone who disagrees. They killed like hundreds of civilians on that space cruise liner just to kidnap like one scientist lady. So there's no real nuance to be had with these guys, and you can't even join them. The best you can do is decide not to end the incursions during the final mission, which you can do if you really want to do repetitive ship self-destructing missions. Otherwise, you're forced to be their worst enemy. And the central plot is that despite being a fairly small army of UC and FC defectors, using the power of X-Tech MacGuffin metal, they can use it to mass produce their killer robot soldiers to bolster their ranks, with X-Tech being a new rare material added in Free Lanes that allows you to roll for legendary effects on your guns by spending X-Tech and a decent chunk of money to ask RNGesus to bless your gun with plus 15% ADS damage. It's like a more directly controllable version of Astra. It allows you to easily trick out your favorite weapons with legendary effects at any given gun workbench, and it's a nice feature to have for sure. And it adds a nice layer of power customization to the shoot and loot game loop. But it'll just make you go from a killing machine to a massacre machine, with brand new and easily accessible finely tuned legendary effects. Also, unfortunately, the actual Terran Armada main quest is mind-numbingly repetitive. It has a handful of cool missions, like a mission to infiltrate and destroy a robot factory that's hidden in an asteroid, and Bucky's charming side quest, of course. But you have to clear like 7 or 8 of these incursions to complete the main story, and they're essentially the exact same quest each time. Cruise on over to the incursion, dogfight with Terrans, fight through hordes of robots with guns and some humans, self-destruct the Terran ship in space or on a planet, and then just rinse and repeat until you unlock the last quest to confront the Terran commander lady. And more than half the quests here in this DLC are recycled content and checklists of repetitive quests, which is not very inspiring stuff that makes you think, damn, I gotta hop back on the Starfield expeditiously. You're not really missing out on much here. It's just more shoot and loot. But now with robots with guns, who are like the only new enemy added by this DLC. But with all of that covered, and all these new updates under Starfield's belt, is the game a much improved product from release, and is it truly worth your time in the big old 2026? Well, it kinda depends. If you really enjoy the modern Bethesdan game loop of looting and shooting with light, perk-based RPG elements in a nassified future where humanity has settled amongst the stars, then these new updates will be very pleasurable to you. It just adds more content, new and varied POIs to encourage more planetary exploration, new side quests and star stations, and finally, some actual space travel that isn't just slowly putting around a planet's orbit before opening up the fast travel menu to do the actual traveling. But if you were hoping for a true evolution in Starfield's exploration, story, and world, you'll be pretty disappointed by these updates, as it's just an improvement on what already exists. And outside of the cruise mode, there isn't anything truly new going on here. And I think that after playing Starfield for like a week and a half, I can identify the 2 main problems with Starfield that made it fail in comparison to other BGS titles. And those problems are, 1. The game's story and lore is lame, and 2. Starfield is just simply too outdated to hang with the big cats in the mid-2020s. Bethesda had free reign to create a brand new universe for the first time in decades, and they completely squandered that opportunity, with uninteresting and sanitized factions with bare-bones lore that fails to capture players in the same way Elder Scrolls or Fallout lore can. Factions have almost zero co-interactions and consequences for joining up with the UC or the FC. Even killing UC CIA goons and becoming an evil-ass pirate has no real impact on your status with the UC as a whole, which makes the Starfield not feel like an actual living galaxy, but more like a sectioned-off theme park that prioritizes player empowerment over all else, which makes this game's world feel incredibly static and uninteresting. Plus, the main plot fails to bring anything interesting to the table. New Game Plus is a nice feature to have, but without meaningful consequences to your choices, hopping universes just ends up completely detaching you from even caring about the game's universe much at all, and its main gameplay incentive is just to do boring as fuck temple grinding for stronger space shout powers, so you can then kill enemies more efficiently, so you can then re-enter the Unity to do even more temple grinding, along with being mildly amused at the wacky changes to constellation between universes. Plus, the way Earth's destruction is handled in the game's story and overarching lore is just so mind-bendingly bizarre that it undermines the rest of the game's story and world at large. It just kind of feels like nothing matters, and nobody cares. So why care back? And as for the actual gameplay, it's just simply outdated. Outdated dialogue, outdated world building, outdated engine, outdated gameplay loop, outdated loading screens, even outdated space travel. This game had its ship flying and exploration completely mogged by some British nerds. It got its dialogue and open world mogged by some Polish guys, and it's got its space world building mogged by Canadians, and the gameplay, I mean, it's cool. But it's just like Fallout 4 in space. You just kill hordes of enemies in dungeons, loot credits, ammo, food, and medicine along the way, fight boss enemies for randomly generated legendary items, and then looting an end dungeon chest for money, a decent item or weapon, Astra and X-Tech, and repeat ad Astra. But unlike Fallout 4, it's got less robust weapon crafting and enemy variety, and it's kind of hard to want to invest in weapon crafting and to take all the time to gather up resources and doing research so you can finally craft attachments when you can just, play the game normally, and find sweet tricked out weapons with multiple attachments for free in cases and chests. But just from the gameplay and the game feel, it's mechanically Bethesda's best work, don't get me wrong. The shooting is the best it's ever felt in a BGS game. Dungeons are super detailed and they're full of clutter objects and food. And shooting guys on a derelict space station while in zero gravity, or boarding another starship and then shooting it up, or shooting guys in the air while jumping around on a low gravity moon, all while dressed up like a NASA super soldier, is a really killer idea that tickles my violent deep lizard brain in some pretty fun ways. And these are things that I've always wanted to be able to do in a video game. But the gunplay and the space powers are just so straightforward and simplistic, the combat loop just kind of simply becomes boring after a while. Especially when most enemies are either borderline fodder who die in 1 to 2 hits, or are ridiculous bullet sponges with little in between, unless it's like one of those boss enemies that has like 4 health bars. It all just starts to grate on you after a while, doing the same thing over and over again. Plus, this game just loves to waste your time. Loading screens. Go through 2 loading screens to travel to a planet to progress 1 quest step. Listen to boring dialogue with slow-ass voice delivery. Fire up the grav drive and wait 5 seconds to jump to a loading screen. Slowly dock and undock from star stations. Watch unskippable animations that don't even cover loading screens to maximize time efficiency. Follow NPCs around as they slowly pathfind to the next quest step. Listen to them waffle on with other NPCs until they allow you to talk. Fumble through layered menus and confusing starship menus. Hoof it for 3 to 5 minutes on a barren planet to do a boring temple floating minigame. I mean, this shit had me getting a little antsy at times, just from how little was actually happening. And I felt like half the gameplay here is just teleporting around the galaxy via menus and talking to NPCs with subpar dialogue. And it just eats up hours and hours of your time. It just makes the game feel like a total slog at times too, especially on any new playthroughs. This video is already taking way too long to come out just because of how stretched out this game is. And by the time you reach the larger dungeons and some more interesting quests, it's already been dozens of hours that you've sunk into this thing. And it also has bloated and redundant features like base building, which I didn't even talk about until now because there's just zero incentive to actually build and maintain bases outside of doing it because you just kind of can. It's just a huge time sink for a little gameplay benefit beyond flexing and storage space and getting some extra resources, I suppose. But hey, you can now build a UC vs FC tabletop colony wargame setup using action figures that you can find while out exploring, and that's charming. And the biggest problem Starfield faces for me personally is that for a game that was touted as the ultimate exploration game from Bethesda, they literally wouldn't shut up about exploration and discovery in all the trailers and marketing. But with thousands of planets to explore across hundreds of solar systems, the exploration completely fails to hide the fact that you aren't really exploring a cohesive universe, and it's incredibly obvious that you're just navigating layered menus to teleport to a procedurally generated square of Perlin noise map planet surfaces with random prefabbed locations and geological formations dotted all over the map. Or it's just a main quest or story location plopped down in a generated landscape. Previous Bethesda games could effortlessly sell you on the illusion that you're in a huge, but still cohesive world, even when you're doing those obvious procedurally generated radiant quests. But Starfield can't even come close to feeling like it's an authentic space travel and exploration game. It's simply too disjointed and engine restricted to sell you on the illusion it claims it was made for. And there's still plenty of bugs that I ran into. Menu buttons not working, fast travel not working, a bug I call the Andreja slingshot, where she would run out ahead of me and into walls for no real reason after loading into new areas, slow and dumb enemy AI. I met a woman chilling on the surface of the moon without a spacesuit on. Like, ain't you fucking cold, lady? I somehow hit Andreja with my car while I was in midair, and plenty of other wonky character model jittering and tons of minor physics bugs. Although I never experienced a single crash to desktop even once while doing this playthrough. So that's something worth noting, I guess. But that's not to say all of Starfield is irredeemable, unplayable garbage caca feces. It's still got some solid quests here and there, and the shipbuilding can be pretty satisfying if you invest into it, despite how cluttered the menus are. And it's pretty cool to have your own personal starship that you can modify to your heart's content, and a pretty impressive and modular shipbuilding system. And making it your mobile home base is pretty sweet too. And standing next to your large starship on a planet's surface is pretty awe-inspiring at times. And I also really love the whole idea and look of the NASA punk aesthetic that they were going for. I love the NASA-styled ship consoles. Most ship interiors look really good and are properly NASA-fied. There's a lot of great details on doors and hatches. Most star stations look really great. And I really like how much varied space food there is in this game. Like the chunks, whiskey juice boxes, sealed Pyrex containers, bags of water, and pretty much everything edible is in airtight sealed containers and space-friendly bags that you can grip and suck on. Pause. And the spacesuits, jetpacks, and helmets all mostly look pretty great, especially the throwback Mercury and Apollo suits that you can find. Like, I look like Neil Armstrong with a gun. This is fucking fantastic. And sure, as a lifelong NASA nerd, I'm super biased in favor of this design aesthetic, but I just like how this game looks most of the time. Most of the time. Plus, some quests are still pretty good. Like the Londinian quest in the UC Vanguard was pretty memorable, even if the Terramorph Anomaly boss was a total wimp. I found Andreja's companion quest fairly compelling, and her true desire to make things right with some former smugglers that she left high and dry during a Zealot attack was some pretty good stuff. And the quest to retrieve Crix's legacy at the end of the Crimson Fleet side quest was surprisingly very good, as we find that the legacy ship that was carrying a bank vault's worth of credits was fried by an electromagnetic storm and was stranded in the orbit of a gas giant, and all their comms and engines were completely kaput, and the crew on board slowly starved to death as they ran out of supplies with no hope of being rescued. And we can hear logs from their last moments, where they're so weak and starved from lack of supplies that they can barely even see or even stay conscious anymore. It's honestly kind of extremely harrowing. And we also learned that the legendary Jasper Crix, founder of the Crimson Fleet and the mastermind behind the UC's biggest jailbreak, fell into the same trap that the Legacy did. He ended up finding his legacy, but his ship also got fried by the storm, and he slowly starved to death on board the Legacy as well. But not before he got betrayed by a fellow Crimson Fleet member that left him to die so she could lead the fleet herself, revealing that the entire Crimson Fleet mythology was built on lies and myth-making. And I mean, it's the classic Bethesda formula of questing and now looter-shootering, which, love it or hate it, really does resonate with some gamers. I mean, Fallout 76 still gets players in 2026, and Skyrim still easily pulls 20,000 plus daily players, so it obviously clicks for plenty of people. But Starfield is also sort of the breaking point of the classic Bethesda formula, as some will still like it, sure, but lots and lots of other people will see it as outdated and uninteresting, and in some cases, offensively ass. Seeing this game as a product of a beloved studio stuck in their ways, and unable to adjust to the evolving gaming industry's competition, and even their own internal growth, and combine outdated gameplay with boring and sanitized lore where nobody seems to care much about anything, shallow background lore that's been simplified to a frustrating degree, and add in an underwhelming main quest that just raises more questions than answers, and kind of just feels like Star Wars Jedi vs. Sith, but with universe hopping that ramps you up to a new game plus mode that exists to feed you into boring temple grinding for slightly stronger space powers. And for all these reasons, I don't think Starfield is ever going to really make a comeback or maintain a solid player base into the future like Skyrim, New Vegas, or Fallout 4 even managed to do. It will most likely leave a legacy of being a misguided experiment that ate up a bit too much time for Bethesda, which now leaves Bethesda's entire future in question for most, and in extremely serious doubt for others. But let's just hope that Starfield is a lesson, and not a blueprint for Elder Scrolls 6. But I'm not holding my breath. But that's all I got for you today. And if you're still watching this, thank you very much. Bit of a longer one than I expected, but that's how it goes. But that's all I got for you. Okay, I love you. Goodbye.